Okay. Good to go.
All right. Let me see here. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the April 20th, 2020 virtual meeting via Zoom of our Burlingame City Council. We're glad you joined us tonight. And we thank you for being with us. At this point, the time is right now 7:03 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance as we do for all of our council meetings, virtual and in person. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this point, what I'd like to do is, before we even begin roll call, I'd like to turn it over to the city clerk just to remind new viewers who may not be familiar with Zoom how we operate in our virtual environment, remembering that all of us are on video the whole time, and there's some protocols of how the public can participate in the meeting. So at this point, Madam City Clerk, if you could take it away.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways for everyone to comment on either an agenda item or just in general on the non-agenda, the public comment section. So you can either email public comment at burlingame.org, which I'll be checking on my computer, or you can chat me. And the chat is found on the bottom of your Zoom screen. It looks like a little chat bubble, and the only one you'll be able to chat is me. So those are your two options for how to comment during this session.
Okay, thank you for that. At this point, let's go ahead and do our roll call.
Councilmember Coulson?
Here.
Councilmember Brownrigg?
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Here.
Vice Mayor O'Brien?
Here.
Mayor Beach?
Here. All right, thank you. We're all present and accounted for. I'm going to ask the city clerk, the city attorney to report out from closed session, which we did have tonight at 6 p.m.
Thank you. There were two items in the closed session. Direction was given, but no reportable action was taken as to the first one. And as to the second, which was my review, there was no reportable action tonight. I was not present for the latter part of that.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. Okay, with that, we're going to move to upcoming events. I do have a few announcements. Probably the most important thing for all of us, perhaps, that we could announce all year, that it is census time. So please, members of the public, if you haven't already responded, to make sure you've been counted in the 2020 census. It happens once a decade. This is so important that each and every one of us are counted so that we get appropriate and fair political representation, so that we get resources from the federal and state government, so that we have the appropriate resources to manage COVID-19. All of these things play deeply into whether we have money to fix our roads and highways. Census being counted, everyone, it's safe, it's secure, it's private, and it's very important. And there's various ways you can participate. You can do it on the website, my2020census.gov, or you can even call 844-330-2020. If you want to Google San Mateo, County of San Mateo census, there's lots of links on the website as well. And responding to the census, you can do it online in less than 5 minutes. So hopefully everybody will participate. Burlingame currently is lagging behind some other cities as far as census participation. We are at about 62%, which is really good. It's about 10% over the California average, but we are lagging behind Hillsborough and San Carlos, who are up around 71%. So we're above the county average, but we need to do even better. So I encourage everybody to make sure, even during these remarkable times where we're sheltered in place, take time to respond to the census. We still have lots of activities going on at our library virtually and Parks and Rec Department, even though those buildings are closed. I encourage you to check out our websites. We also have another opportunity, thanks to Burlingame Neighborhood Network, For any members of our community who may need assistance in some way, shape, or form, and perhaps you don't know your neighbors or feel comfortable, or you may be at risk and you can't go out to the store, you can, of course, reach out to burlingameneighborhoodnetwork.org. Or if you're not an internet kind of a person, you can leave a voicemail or call the city at 650-558-7204. And you can leave a message and we'll connect you with a Burlingame Neighborhood Network volunteer. If you have personal protective equipment that you'd like to drop off or donate to the County of San Mateo, you can, of course, find lots of information about how to get it in the right hands in our city e-news, but there's also a drop bin and opportunity at the Burlingame Police Department, and you can call them for more information on their non-emergency line. Announcement that if you are a regular of Highway 101, there's going to be a major infrastructure project, a deck replacement at Alamany Circle. It's been moved up to start taking place April 25th. This is a major highway project that should last about 10 days and will really shut down that area. But if you can avoid that intersection at the end of April in San Francisco, recommend you do so. But it's great that Caltrans was able to respond and move that project up from July. There's also we'll be celebrating in just a few moments the 50th birthday of Earth Day this week, but on the 21st, tomorrow night, there's a great presentation with the Citizens Environmental Council of Burlingame, Take a Bite Out of Climate Change, to figure out how you can eat a more plant-based diet and help reduce carbon emissions from 7 to 8:30 p.m. There are Zoom meeting invitations. We encourage the community to learn and be a part of that event. Lots of great information in the city's e-news. If you want to sign up for weekly updates from the city of Burlingame, chock full of information, you can do that at burlingame.org. I also would like to just make two other quick announcements. I think during COVID-19, we need good news as much as we need sobering news. And I'd like to start a little tradition. We'll at least announce some really positive things happening in Burlingame. In the last 3 weeks alone, I want to have a special thank you to all folks who donated for Meals for Mills. Hospital workers are getting meals delivered 3 times a day by Burlingame restaurants, thanks to Burlingame donors who have collectively over the past 3 weeks donated about $62,000 to this fund. So it's a win for our local Burlingame restaurants and also the wonderful healthcare workers and support staff on the front lines at Mills Hospital. And just this week, there were another 83 McKinley parents who got together to help fundraise for Meals for Mills and a quiz-style trivia Zoom night. Not only did they help out fundraise for Meals for Mills, but also got Safeway gift cards for some of the most deserving McKinley families. So there's lots of great stuff happening in our community that's really uplifting, and it's just very Burlingame. So we wanted to celebrate that tonight. Colleagues, do we have any other announcements of activities or items of news? Seeing none, we will move on.
Emily, it's Donna.
Yes, hi Donna.
Sorry about that. I just want to also really quickly note the mayor of Hillsborough pointed out today and that if you have anything, diapers, children's supplies, food supplies for Samaritan House, you can drop that off at the Hillsborough Police Department or Hillsborough City Hall. They have some big bins. I know I was going to make a trip down and I'm just going to run over there instead. So it saves you a lot of time and energy.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point too. Any other announcements from colleagues? Now that I'm finally looking here to see hands raised. All right, excellent. Thank you so much. With that, we're going to go to item 6, which is our presentation event. And tonight we've got something really, really special to celebrate. I think if we had, well, there's a lot of things that are different under COVID-19. And one of the things that's different is how we were able to celebrate the 50th birthday, the anniversary of Earth Day, April 22nd, 2020, 50 years ago. That wonderful tradition started in this country, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So we want to go ahead and turn it over at this point and thank our sustainability coordinator, Sigal Michael, for all the incredible work she does for sustainability. But Madam City Manager, would you like to speak first or turn it over to Sigal first?
I see Segal there and she just popped her video on, so I will turn it right over to her. She's our expert.
All right, thank you.
Is this, I'm sorry, I missed it a bit. Is this for the proclamation?
Yes.
Okay.
We'd like to say a few words about Earth Day.
Sure.
Thank you. What we did say is thank you for all the incredible work you do for sustainability in Burlingame, but certainly our celebration of Earth Day's birthday has changed over the last 3 or 4 weeks, but
Yeah.
we're celebrating tonight, so take it away.
Well, this was an idea actually from Mayor Beach that since this is the 50th anniversary, that we should do a proclamation to recognize and continue our commitment, restate our commitment to the protecting the environment and conserving resources. And I think it's very timely now, considering our ways of celebrating are very limited. So I think this is an excellent way to just announce loudly that we are all in for continuing to, the biggest climate issue today is climate change, continuing to address that and implement our climate action plan, which you'll have some ways to continue implementing that later today and tonight's meeting. But yes, that's all I have to say about the proclamation, and I'm happy that the council, this is something they wanted to take on.
Well, thank you, Segal. We appreciate your work, and Segal's led the way to really have some great resources on the City of Burlingame website celebrating Earth Day, and it even highlights the Citizens Environmental Council of Burlingame, some of their programs, even what you can do now, a whole checklist of 50 things each one of us can do in our daily lives to make things a little bit better. And also previewing something we would have loved to do this week as a community, but we'll be sort of building on the cleanup that we do on the Bayfront. We'll sort of build on that and make it the big Burlingame cleanup come September, and we'll figure out how we can come together and help kind of clean up some hot spots in our community. Hopefully we'll be able to do that as COVID-19 shelter in place settles down a little bit. Colleagues, before we read this wonderful proclamation that staff put together for us, do we have anybody else would like to comment? All right, seeing none, I could read this entire proclamation, but mostly there's a lot of whereas. We know how these official proclamations can be kind of wordy, but the big highlights are that on April 22nd, 1970 was when Earth Day began. And I think we take some special pride in the Bay Area because at the time, our representative, who preceded districts have changed over the years, but Representative Pete McCloskey was a co-chair of the very first Earth Day. And certainly we've had opportunities to all hear from him over the years, but really worked in a bipartisan manner to make sure that environmental concerns like oil spills, polluting factories, toxic dumps, pesticides, and loss of wilderness and wildlife were on the forefront. And as a result, kind of a direct result of this effort, bipartisan effort, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency was created at the end of 1970. The Clean Air, the Clean Water, and Endangered Species Acts all passed in the 1970s. And Earth Day continues to expand and defend environmental progress. It's just a reminder for the constant need for environmental activism, stewardship commitments, and sustainability efforts. And so with all of the great words that are in this proclamation, I, Emily Beach, the mayor of the city of Burlingame in the state of California, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2020 as the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and the city of Burlingame will encourage all residents and businesses to celebrate the earth and strive for a sustainable future for the protection of all of Earth's habitats and all of its species. Here on April 22nd, well, April 20th, 2020. Thank you so much for that, Segal. We appreciate your efforts and everything you do for our city. All right, with that, it is time to move, unless we have any other public comments on this item, Madam City Clerk.
No, there's no public comments.
Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7 on our agenda. public comments, non-agenda items. And this is the point in the meeting for those of you who may not be regulars with us. Members of the public may speak about any item that is currently not on our evening's agenda. This is your time to make your comment. The Ralph M. Brown Act, which is the state and local agency open meeting law, prohibits our city council from acting or discussing or deliberating on any matter that is not on the agenda, but we can listen to your comments, take them under consideration, and then consider putting them on a future city council agenda meeting. So with that, Madam City Clerk, do we have any public comments not on the agenda?
We do. We have a couple that came in by email.
Okay.
The first one comes to us from Lisa Tyree. She says, now is not a good time to rip up sidewalks to make it even more difficult to maneuver. Leave the small areas be and focus on your huge potholes and metal plates on the streets. In this time where people of all ages are trying to get out for a walk, you will disrupt it even more with closures and non-accessibility. Everyone and anyone that lives here knows the block to walk about, step over this or that, and how to navigate. My little street has turned into a little main street with people walking about and trying to keep smiles on their faces. Please do not disrupt this in this difficult time. More shutdowns and closures are not needed right now. Please postpone this project until things settle down and start getting somewhat back to normal. We need to focus on more important issues. Thank you. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for that comment. Did that resident make a note of their address? You don't need to announce it publicly, but that staff can follow up. Okay, thanks.
Our other one comes from Manito Velasco. He says, good evening, Madam Mayor, honorable council members. Thank you for continuing the tough business of keeping the city running. Thank you for your service. The shelter in place has a lot more Burlingame out on our streets, whether they're jogging and responsibly social distancing, on roller skates or scooters or on a bike. This is actually one big positive from the current situation. But there is a hidden danger. Yes, traffic volumes are down, but the traffic speeds remain high, if not higher, now that there's less traffic friction. It comes at the same time that more families are out and some even crafting some very welcome inspirational chalk art on some blocks. Streets like Sanchez, Cortez, and Bayswater have scary speeding and people conflicts. I hope the city messages to people that speeding and other unsafe driving behavior are still being actively enforced, that the police department has issues and will continue to issue tickets to irresponsible drivers. Drivers, and they're not all from Burlingame, have no fear of consequences or tickets before the crisis, and from looking out today, it's even worse. I hope the message goes out in the e-news or social media accounts that speeding is not being excused and is really considered antisocial. This may be as important a public health message as hand washing or face masks. Thank you, and may all of us stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Mr. Velasco.
And those are the only two I got.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. At this point, we'll move to item 8 for approval of the consent calendar. And this is a group of items that are usually approved in a single motion unless any of them are pulled for a separate discussion from colleagues on City Council or from members of the public who wish to comment on an item. So at this point, colleagues, does anybody wish to pull an item on the consent calendar for additional discussion or questions? And I can't see.
Yes,
Oh,
please,
yes.
Madam Mayor. I'd like to briefly pull item 8E as in Edward and 8H as in Harry.
Item 8E and item 8H. Thank you. Other colleagues wishing to pull item off the consent calendar? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for items 8A, B, C, D, F, G, and I.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, did we just check and make sure that the members of the public didn't want to pull any of these items?
Thank you for air traffic control on that. Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to pull an item on the consent calendar?
No, there are no items.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve as indicated by the mayor.
Okay, this, we had a motion from Councilmember Ortiz and a second, I believe, from the Vice Mayor. We do need a roll call vote for all of our votes that are done by video conference. So with that, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. With that, those items on the consent calendar do pass. So we'll move to item 8E and we'll turn it over to Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I really appreciate that staff lists in the agenda the contract value that we're talking about. I think it helps people steer towards the bigger ticket items. But in this particular case, it is a little misleading. And I just wanted to be clear for the public that this is with respect to the Anson Burlingame Art Project. I think we're all excited about it. I think it'll be a terrific legacy piece for the city of Burlingame, but that $210,000 is entirely funded through philanthropic giving. And so that contract value does not reflect a cost to the city budget. And I think it's doubly important in this time of COVID to underline that point for this agenda item. I have nothing substantive to say about the agenda item. I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. And a big shout out to the members of that committee that have really been working on this for 2017. We had some wonderful advisors, Ruth Waters, Russ Cohen, Leslie Holtzman, Janet Martin, David Chai, Andrew Norris, and Councilmember Brownrigg. You and I worked on that, but your efforts to fundraise and really help materialize this, we were at about a 50% a year or two ago, and then you were able to bring home with hard work fundraising for that last section. So thank you so much for your vision on this project and your deep commitment to not only the memory of Anson Burlingame but really for what his values represent. And you and Mr. Chai have really helped teach all of us about a part of our history we should be very proud of. So
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Colleagues, do we have any other questions or comments before we open it up to public comment on this? All right, seeing none. Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
No, we don't.
Okay, then with that, I think this is very exciting, and I'm sure the artist that's been selected by the committee is just delighted to get the show on the road. I'd like to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Yes.
Second.
And I heard the motion come from Councilmember Brownrigg, but I'm sorry I missed who created the second. That was Councilmember Coulson. Thank you, with a second. And all in favor, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 8H. And I believe Councilmember Brownrigg also wanted to pull that item, which is a resolution which authorizes the city manager to renew the service agreement with Granicus for agenda management, video streaming services, and closed caption. It's sort of the interface we use to have our meeting documents transparent to the public. So Councilmember Brownrigg, yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So, I think Granicus has been a terrific software platform for us. As far as I can tell, it's been easy for all of us to use. I know I go back and use Granicus to look up old meetings and so forth. My comment is more by way of process and perhaps directed to our city clerk, and that is, it is a significant software contract, $160,000 or so, and software changes. And I wanted to know if we did look at other vendors, and I'm content in this case if we didn't, but then I would suggest that next time, 3 years from now, we do perhaps see what the state of the market is. But perhaps we already did that, and I just wanted to give you a chance to discuss that.
We didn't look at other vendors this time. I'm more than willing to in the future. It is fairly small market, and listening to the grumblings of the other city clerks has led me to believe that we're with the right one for right now. But I agree, these things do change, so we'll have to consider other ones the next time around.
I'm very content with that. I just think it's good discipline to periodically put larger software contracts out for review and make sure you're still with the best platform. Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Colleagues, does anyone else have questions? Yes, Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. So I tried to look through this contract to see if, I believe there had been a question about the Spanish translation and ability to translate into other languages. Is this still just all in English, or were we able to get that capability?
It's still in English right now. The cost of us having a Spanish translator, Spanish or other language translations was really high. We can revisit that. I've been waiting to hear from the community, see if they need it. Obviously, you don't want to just sit around and wait. So maybe we can put out a little message to see if it's something that community members are interested in and if there's a need.
Thank you for that question. Colleagues, do we have other questions? Seeing none, Madam City Clerk, can you tell us if we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
There are no members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, then we'll entertain, seeing no other discussion or hands raised. Would someone like to propose a motion to approve item 8H?
Move to approve.
We have a motion from the Vice Mayor with a second from Councilmember Ortiz. We'll do our roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yeah.
or Ortiz, and Ortiz, Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes, and just a clarification, I think the second came from Councilmember Brownrigg.
Oh,
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
yes. All right, motion carries. And thank you, Councilmember Ortiz, for correcting my lack of hearing properly. So with that, that concludes the consent calendar. We'll move on to item 9A, where we have our public hearings. And this next item is a public hearing to introduce an ordinance repealing chapter 8.10 of the Burlingame Municipal Code and adopt a new chapter to regulate the use of disposable food serviceware by food facilities. And we do appreciate staff putting this on. I believe this was an item that the council expressed interest under the leadership of former Mayor Coulson. Last year, some of this item began and the work began, and it's been a work in progress. And so we look forward to hearing the staff report on this item. Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, did you have a
Yes.
question? Yes.
I do need to recuse myself from this item 9A because I was on the subcommittee that worked on the ordinance at the county level.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor O'Brien. We appreciate your work on it and your recusal. Madam City Attorney, we can still keep the Vice Mayor in the room, correct?
That's right. The vice mayor is recusing for prudential reasons, but not because she has an actual government code conflict. So she can stay on the meeting and we'll just not be voting on the item.
Sounds good. So with that, we'll turn it over to the city manager for the staff report on this item.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to invite Jennifer Lee. She's our Environmental Regulatory Compliance Manager. She'll be giving you a PowerPoint presentation. Jennifer worked quite hard on this outreach along with Sigal Michael, our sustainability coordinator. So I see Jennifer has unmasked herself. She's ready to go.
Great. And do I have control, Megan?
And we can hear you. It looks like your presentation's up.
Great. Okay. Let's see.
Megan, can you give her
Okay.
control to advance?
I think I got it now.
You have it. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Emily Beach, City Council members. My name is Jennifer Lee, and I am the Environmental Regulatory Compliance Manager for the City of Burlingame. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. And happy Earth Week to you all. And so before I start, I know that this is kind of an interesting time to propose this ordinance, but I just wanted to put it out there that we had planned to introduce this ordinance specifically during the week of Earth Day to show the city's commitment to sustainability. And so tonight I will be giving a presentation on what this ordinance is and the requirements. And so to kind of preface this whole thing kind of started with the plastic pollution issue that we've been seeing in our storm drains, in our beaches, in our streets. And so we know that the plastic pollution issue has been one of the issues that is of growing presence. From our Coastal Cleanup Day data, we've seen that plastic straws have continued to be one of the top 10 items collected during trash pickups. And local studies have shown that 67% of street litter is from food and beverage takeout packaging. And when that packaging goes into our storm drains, because our storm drains are separate from a wastewater treatment plant, all of that actually goes straight to the bay untreated. And so like the images on the right, you see what actually ends up happening is that we go out to our bayfront cleanup or coastal cleanups and actually end up picking up this litter that really could have just been avoided in the first place. And so we also know that from studies that plastic doesn't actually biodegrade into the raw materials. They just break apart into smaller pieces, collectively referred to as microplastics. And microplastics have been detected in the seafood that is sold for human consumption, in the fish and marine mammals, in the gut, because those plastic particles are often mistaken as food for these marine mammals. And so it's also harming our marine environment, as well as, ending up in our human bodies as well. And on top of that, we have the state of the recycling, where countries such as China has taken a lead in not accepting our recyclable materials. And so countries such as the US are kind of struggling as to where we send our recyclables, with China taking the lead on not accepting our recyclables. There are other Asian countries that are also taking suit and following their lead by not accepting our refuse. And so we're kind of going into a situation of what to do with our recyclables. And there are long-term solutions currently being explored and implemented, but they are long-term solutions. And so those would take years to really fully implement. And so there are some actions that we can start thinking about today to help address this issue. And so one thing that we could do is to reduce the amount of single-use plastics that we're seeing at food facilities. And so the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability has actually proposed and drafted a disposable food serviceware ordinance to reduce the amount of single-use plastics in our community. And they brought that up to their Board of Supervisors, which was passed at their February 25th meeting. And so individual cities that would like to follow suit with that county's lead can also bring it to their respective city councils or town councils for consideration of adoption. And the objectives of this ordinance are threefold. The first is to reduce non-recyclable and non-compostable waste at the source. And disposable food serviceware items are examples of that are shown in the pictures on the right. You have plastic straws, cups, bowls, utensils, packaging, toothpicks, etc. The second goal is to improve the health and safety of Burlingame community members. Some of these plastic materials or even fiber-based materials have a lining or coating that's made of a man-made chemical, commonly known as PFAS or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're actually used in Teflon and other materials to make them anti-sticky or anti-stain resistant and slick, and they're kind of like a waterproofing material that, although is good for when you're, I guess, when you're cooking, they also have lots of chemicals in it. And so we're proposing materials that do not have that chemical in it. And the last goal of this ordinance is to help keep litter out of the San Francisco Bay. Our municipal stormwater ordinance has a goal of a 100% trash reduction by 2022. And so this ordinance would help us meet that goal. And lastly, although this fourth one isn't an intended goal of this ordinance, I did want to mention that this ordinance would help me measure 18 of the city's newly adopted climate action plan, which focuses on zero waste, which is actually one of the top 5 highest greenhouse gas emissions reduction category. And so implementing this ordinance would also help support our climate action plan. And so before staff wanted to introduce this to City Council, we conducted our own public engagement process to really just ask our community and see if people were interested in this ordinance. And so we did a number of ways, a number of communication methods to let the city know that we were considering this ordinance. And it was actually all through our online public survey that was on our website. And we let the residents know about the survey through digital media. We put a blast on our e-news, as well as our Facebook, Nextdoor, and Instagram social media pages. This outreach effort was also picked up by the Daily Journal and was on the front page. So got lots of traction there. And lastly, we also sent letters out to the 206 food facilities that would be impacted by this ordinance. And that letter was available in English, but also had a phrase in Spanish and Chinese that translated copies were available. And we also sent direct emails to specific stakeholders such as the Downtown Burlingame Business Improvement District, the Downtown Broadway Business Improvement District, the Chamber of Commerce, Citizens Environmental Council, and a couple of the high schools here as well to engage our youth. And so the survey asked 2 main questions. The first question was, do you support the city adopting this ordinance? And we received a total of 332 unique responses. And out of the responses, 291 people said yes, they were in support, which is about 88%. And sorry about that. Ooh. Okay, there we go. And 32 or about 10% said no. And 9 people or about 3% said other. Other would be, they typed in an answer such as maybe, conditional, or yes, but with changes. And second, we wanted to know which category or which groups that these folks identified with. And so most of the people that responded said that they lived in Burlingame. About half said that they own property in Burlingame. And about a fifth said that they work in Burlingame. And about 10% said they visited Burlingame. And about 4% said they go to school in Burlingame. And this was a multiple choice answer. So someone could have picked multiple answers for this question. And so some of the feedback we received were, about 80% or over 80% were mostly positive, but there were, some people who were not in support of this ordinance. And I think it's important to show, some of the direct comments that we did receive. So our residents expressed that, they believe that Burlingame should do the most to reduce disposable plastics. They're glad that we're considering this. We have Recology as their waste hauler, and so they accept composting services. So someone said that we should take advantage of them. However, there were some comments that I think is worth highlighting. Businesses have a high cost of rent already, and so adding this ordinance would be a burden to them. And support of reduction of plastics is important. However, some businesses already have low profit margins. So this, could be an unintended consequence on top of, everything else that is going through. So I just wanted to be transparent that these were some of the comments that we were seeing. And so in general, these are some groups of feedbacks that we, comments that we got. Number one, people expressed that we should be educating the businesses and consumers about the provisions of the ordinance, which is great because we actually have in the ordinance that this would not go into effect immediately. There's actually a 1-year delay time. And so during that time, we would be educating the businesses and the consumers about the provisions of this ordinance before it went into effect. Number two, there is an exemption for people with disabilities who need a plastic straw to drink. So that it wasn't a concern that was raised, that has been already addressed in the ordinance. Like I said, for number three, there is a delay effective time of when this would go into effect. So it does not go into effect immediately. There's actually a 1-year delay time. Number four, ensure that only healthy food serviceware products are allowed in this ordinance, which I'll talk about later, but only products that are BPI certified or by the Biodegradable Plastic Products Institute have to be used or a similar certification. And lastly, another comment that we received, many fiber-based takeout containers are not transparent, which makes it difficult for customers to see what's inside the container. And the ordinance was actually revised so that it would allow transparent covers as long as the body of the takeout container was still fiber-based. And so who will this ordinance impact? So it would impact food facilities or any entity that provides prepared food for public consumption, which includes restaurants, farmers markets, food trucks, delis, cafeterias. Note that schools, public schools are governed by the state, and so wouldn't affect your public schools, but only private schools. And so specifically, what items would this impact? So it's kind of broken down to two groups. There you have the larger items such as plates, bowls, cups, and clamshells. And then there's the second category we're calling accessories, which includes straws, utensils, stirrers, and toothpicks. And so for both of these categories, plastics are not allowed. As you can see here, they're actually, so they're on the left, you have their traditional plastic, and on the right, you have compostable plastic, which both look virtually the same. And although compostable plastic can be composted, it's only composted under a specific set of conditions, such as an industrial composting facility, because the temperatures get hot enough to break it down. So you wouldn't be able to put a compostable fork in your backyard composting just because the temperatures don't reach that amount. And the reason why we're not accepting compostable plastic is that once they get littered or enter into the bay or ocean, they don't break down into raw materials. They are virtually the same as a traditional plastic, and that they would break down to smaller and smaller microplastics and get consumed by marine mammals. And so since those two are not allowed, what is allowed would be a natural fiber-based product, and where you can clearly see the difference between the two, because a lot of times with compostable plastics, it's really hard for the average person to discern whether or not it's compostable or not. And so with this, it's clearly obvious, it's paper, or sugar cane, it's bamboo, and it's obvious that it can actually break down. And the ordinance was also revised so that it allows for a compostable plastic lining. And that's so that if you have any hot foods or sauces, it won't immediately break apart the container, which is, some comments that we received that people don't like some of the, paper straws because they break down too easily. And so as we're starting to see, there's more and more options in the market that actually address some of those concerns. So for larger products, they need to be free of fluorinated chemicals, which is what I mentioned before with the PFAS. And they also need to be certified through the Biodegradable Products Institute, which is a third-party organization that has a list of vendors that are already vetted. So it's pretty easy to find out which products you can and cannot buy. And then for accessories, they can only be available only when needed. So such as like a self-serve station, like you see in the photo below. And so when will this ordinance be effective? And if adopted, the effective date is 30 days after adoption. And the operation and enforcement is 1 year after that effective date. So this wouldn't even be effective until 2021 at the earliest. And so lastly, just to conclude, there are a couple other points I wanted that staff requests discussion and guidance from City Council. One, we received some comments that, even if we were to have this ordinance, there aren't any public compost bins for people to dispose of these materials. And so they would just end up in the garbage bin. And so one idea that we are thinking about is to pilot public compost bins in downtown areas conveniently located near restaurants and other commercial businesses that would be required to comply with this ordinance. And this pilot program would kind of just see how this ordinance would work, if people are composting correctly, and would pretty much serve as an educational opportunity to teach people about this new ordinance and what goes in what bin. And two, currently we have a state law that requires composting of landscaping or yard waste, but not for food waste for businesses and multifamily residential buildings. And so this might be addressed in future state laws, but we just wanted something for you all to discuss if we should have composting food waste for businesses and multifamily residential buildings. And with that, I'll leave it here.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, for the thorough presentation and some of the great visuals that helped talk us through and explain some of the concepts, like the difference between compostable plastic and recyclable plastic. That was very helpful. Colleagues, I'll open it up to our questions first, and then we can open it up after our questions to public comment, and then we can deliberate on this matter. Does anyone have some questions for Ms. Lee or for Segal? Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions and maybe a comment. One, do we envision this covering supermarkets?
So this ordinance would cover anything that is a prepared food, not packaged food. So if the supermarkets already importing food that's already comes pre-packaged in a container, that won't be affected. It's only if they're like a deli, for example, that's preparing food, then they would have to comply with this.
Okay.
Answer your question.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I was a little surprised halfway through to realize that this ordinance does not permit people to use recyclable plastic. So I think there's a lot of confusion that gets created generally actually with the term single-use plastic, because there's going to be, and I obviously just speak from years on the garbage board, but we're going to have I hope, an opportunity this November to vote on a ban on single-use plastic in the state of California. It would move over between now and 2030, basically, to get us off single-use plastic. But in that use of the term, what they mean by single use is that it is impossible to recycle. And so that's basically plastics number 3 through 7. But in that ordinance, or in that referendum, it would permit plastics 1 and 2 because there are markets for recycling that. We're pretty good at recycling plastic 1 and 2. So I just want to confirm that this ordinance does not permit food and plastic 1 and 2. It's like no plastic at all, only fiber-based products.
Correct. That's, yeah, the latter. And there are some exceptions, like for example, plastic straws, if people need it for a health reason or disability needs, then they can have that. So businesses can have a limited supply of that. But in general,
I mean, I completely get the plastic straw thing, and I'm perfectly okay with making that hard to get. It's more that plastic 1 and 2 is, I mean, so let me take a step back. For me personally, I am all over getting rid of plastics in the environment. I mean, by one estimate to the World Wildlife Fund, the studies show that an adult American consumes a credit card every week in plastic that's in the food and in the water. I mean, it's gross. So we absolutely should try to reduce plastic. I just was surprised by the term single use referring to all plastic, because it's not the way single use is used on other stuff. And I guess I'm okay with it. I mean, this is more stringent than I expected. I would say with respect to compostable products like fiber-based, we are investing in technology that's going to try to strip out organic waste from black garbage. So we will try to capture that in the transfer center. And one of the reasons, besides the fact that it's good for the environment, if we can keep organic waste out of going to landfill and turn it into biogas, which is our aspiration, and reducing landfill in general, is that if we're successful, will also mean that our district, the 12 cities, may not have to adhere to the state's mandate on composting. And that actually would save a lot of money. Because if we have to create compost bins for every multifamily building and every business that right now doesn't have a green bin because they don't have yard waste, that is a lot of extra money with extra trucks running around. So if we can handle it at the transfer center, then that's actually, and I think more effective, but also saves everybody some money. So it's a little bit off topic from this ordinance, but I did want to point out that we have a solution for pulling organic waste out of the black garbage stream that we're going to be implementing. So if somebody, it's a long way of saying, if somebody takes a compostable piece of restaurant ware, takeout container, and puts it in the black garbage, we should still be able to capture that. And frankly, even if it goes to the landfill, if it's really fiber-based, biodegradable, it will over time degrade. I mean, that's not the same danger as plastic. So anyway, I stand in support of the motion. I just wanted to clarify a couple of those points. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Brownrigg. And you've done some great work on the garbage board, as we lovingly call it, really the South Bay Waste Management Board. And your continuity on that has been really an asset to the whole, not only Burlingame, but to the county. Colleagues, other questions on this proposal? Yes, Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just curious how this ordinance compares to our neighboring cities in the region.
Yeah, great question. Sorry I didn't get into it in my presentation. So this was an ordinance that was drafted by the County Office of Sustainability, and they went and vetted it through their stakeholders, which include composting facilities, waste haulers, restaurants, Chamber of Commerce, environmental organizations, nonprofits, etc. And so when they brought it to them, they crafted this pretty much in a near final version of it. And then the county wanted the cities to also look into adopting it for our own jurisdictions. And so you may recall that we have a similar agreement or arrangement with the county, where the county took the lead with the model ordinance and individual cities joined in. And specifically, I'm referring back to the the single-use plastic bag ban, as well as the polystyrene or styrofoam as its trademark name is called, takeout ban. So the county drafted those ordinances and individual cities passed it through their own legislative councils. And so for this specific ordinance, the county took the lead. They passed it in their February 25th meeting. And so other cities have also expressed interest. So far, City of South San Francisco actually introduced it to their city council in March. And there are a few other cities that have expressed interest, and we're actually going to bring it to their city councils. But with COVID-19 coming in place, that actually got pushed for now. And so that was recent information that we learned. So other than City of South San Francisco, we are the only other city so far that has gotten this far. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
And Ms. Lee, just to clarify, so we didn't make anything more stringent or relax anything. This is basically taking the county's template and attempting to implement it here, to propose it here in Burlingame. Is that accurate?
Yes, and actually there were two provisions in the ordinance that we actually are relaxing. Per City Attorney Kathleen, when she reviewed the ordinance, there was one provision that actually required businesses to start keeping records of what disposable food serviceware items they were keeping. And so because businesses could if this were to go past and get approved, they would be required to keep that record. And we didn't feel that at this time that they needed to keep a record of everything with everything else that's going on. So we're not requiring businesses to keep a record of what they're buying. So all of the requirements of this would not be enforceable or inspected until 1 year after the effective date. And the second part is that we're using what we're defining as the effective date is when the city adopts it, not from when the county had adopted and their ordinance. So it's going by our timeline.
Okay, so our timeline, and we don't require any inventory management.
Correct. Yes.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Colleagues, other questions? Then if not, I do have a question, and maybe it's just a point of education. And my understanding is the black plastics that currently exist that many of us, I've heard the term used by aspirational recycling. We hope they are recycled, but they are not recyclable. So when you buy a roasted chicken or whatever, if there's a black plastic, that all those plastics, the only plastic in this ordinance that would be allowed would be the clear plastic cover that's recyclable. Is that what you were explaining in the presentation?
Yeah. So we call that wish cycling, where you throw it away, you wish it recycles. But yeah, so there are certain disposable plastics that will be allowed, like the plastic straws that I mentioned, that are for disability needs. There's also the plastic lid that will be allowed. Originally it wasn't, but then we got some feedback that would be a burden, and so the ordinance was revised to allow that.
Okay.
And there's also a comment, I don't know if I need to mention it, but I got while I was giving the presentation.
We'll send it to the city clerk, and we'll see, because we have to be careful about what comments we consider, how they come in. So yes, Madam City, at this time, colleagues, do we have any other questions at this point? And I don't see staff. Madam City Clerk, do we have any public comment on this matter?
Do you want me to read the title of the proposed ordinance first?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
An ordinance of the City of Burlingame repealing Chapter 8.10 of the Burlingame Municipal Code and adopting a new Chapter 8.10 regulating the use of disposable food serviceware by food facilities.
Motion to waive further reading.
And introduce. I'm sorry, if we could just clarify that motion was to waive further reading and introduce it.
Yes, thank you, Madam City
Thanks.
Attorney, and to introduce the ordinance.
And my second was the same.
Yes, we had a motion by Councilmember Brownrigg and a second by Councilmember Ortiz. We'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. All right, that passes unanimously. At this moment, this is where we can open up the public hearing.
Sure, I've received 2 public comments. One states, I strongly encourage Burlingame to adopt the San Mateo single-use plastic ordinance. I'm grateful to see the survey results and overwhelming support of our community of this initiative. It is a critical step in the right direction toward cleaning up our planet. Thank you. And the second one is from Ms.
Madam City Clerk, I'm sorry, who was that from?
That one was from Jennifer. The second one is from Mr. John Kavranian. He states, I would like to see the Sustainability Department work with our 200+ food facilities with resources to buy sustainable and acceptable products. Please provide a resource list of vendors to buy from to our business community. Thank you.
Right, thank you for those comments. So if we don't have any additional public comments at this time, and I'm checking. Yes, if we don't have any additional public hits at this time, I will close the public comment period, and we can, colleagues, discuss whether or not we have any deliberations and determine whether or not to bring it back for a second reading and adoption. So anybody wish to comment on this? I see Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. So I support this. I think it's a great step in the right direction. I'm also very happy that we're going to have a 1-year implementation phase, because my concern right now is that with the, multiple levels of increase of takeout food and the short supply that vendors are having with securing compostable goods, the manufacturing hasn't quite kept up with the demand. I don't want people to not be able to serve food during this time because they cannot acquire the proper kind of storage. So I take Mr. Kavranian's comment really to heart, that if we can help facilitate that in any way, I think we should. And I think a year should be enough time, but if we got to the end of a year and, by some measure, there was still a problem with the supply chain on all this, I think we should be thoughtful about just confirming that, in fact, the restaurants can get what they need.
Thank you for that comment. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with the comments from Councilmember Coulson. I think that, especially in this environment, we don't want to create any undue burdens on our small businesses. And so I think that the timeline is very adequate. And I think I agree we need to be flexible if we need to extend it any further. But I think this is a good step in the right direction. I appreciate staff's efforts on this. And thank you to the county for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, appreciate your comments. Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So like many of us, of course, we've been eating a lot more takeout food than we ever used to. And actually, I've been pleasantly surprised by how many of our local restaurants have already made this switch. So I think it'll be less painful than some fear. I do wonder if we, and I guess this is addressed to Ms. Lee, if we're going to permit clear plastic lids on containers, can we require that those lids be made out of plastic, number 1 or 2? Do we have that discretion?
I believe it does state for compostable plastic, but I'll get back to you on that.
So the difference would be 1 and 2 would be recyclable, not compostable.
Okay, so.
And if compostable works in terms of clarity, I guess that's just as good, but there's no reason to let them make stuff out of 3, 4, 5, the hard stuff. Thank you for that. I certainly support the ordinance.
Thanks for the comments, colleagues. And if staff don't have any additional comments, my closing comment would be I concur with colleagues on this. I think this is a great thing to do, particularly during Earth Day week. I appreciate staff's effort on this, and also to make it thoughtful for Burlingame and not too onerous on the businesses, like that inventory component. I think it's good that we're relaxing that a little bit, having a long implementation phase. And again, huge thanks to the county and the work of our vice mayor, who apparently was very involved in this at the county level. It shows the collaboration of how things like this can really, we could have 20 cities trying to figure this out for ourselves and tweak it. But when the county takes the lead on issues like this, we can really, it can be vetted at a higher level with a lot of different stakeholders. And there's a great model for cities to kind of customize it in a way that works. So with that, we appreciate Vice Mayor O'Brien's work on this, even though she can't participate in the debate as well. With that, it sounds like we have unanimous of 4 of us consent to bring it back for a second reading and adoption. And I don't believe we need any kind of roll call vote on that. So we'll direct the city clerk to publish a summary of the ordinance at least 5 days before, as my screen went blank, before the proposed adoption. Madam City Clerk, are we all set on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. Moving on to item 10. We have staff reports and communication. We have a big meeting tonight. We have 3 important items to discuss, and we'll start with a resolution which could authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with BHM Construction Company for the construction of our new community center, which has been many, many, many years in the making. And with that, we'll turn it over to, I believe, Parks and Rec Director Glomstead, unless the city manager would like to say a few words first.
All right, well, I'll just take it over.
You're just taking it, Margaret.
Yeah, I'm just taking it.
All right,
Good
I was
evening.
muted. This is Margaret's baby. She's been working very hard on this item and this project for years now, so I think she gets the glory.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. All right.
Good evening, Mayor Beach and council members. I'll have to say tonight's going to be a night to remember in the Burlingame history book. After 8 years of thoughtful, hard work by the city council, previous councils, the Park and Rec Commission, other community leaders, the consultant team, the advisory committee, staff, and the Burlingame public, I am proud to present the bid award for the new Burlingame Community Center. Tonight, I have out there in video land, Don Merkis with Group 4 Architecture and George Sands with Griffin Structures. They are my support team to answer any questions that I am not able to tonight as we go through the presentation. So Megan's gonna pop up a very short PowerPoint, and hopefully I'll be able to take it over. Let's see, it looks like it's going. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Why is it not letting me? I don't know. Oh, why is nothing?
Margaret, you should be able to take it over now.
Yeah, I'm trying to open.
I like what I see.
What I can't do is open my whole thing. Let's see if it lets me do that. Oh, it's so darn tiny.
I know that guy.
Huh? Oh, there we go. Thank you.
It looks like you, Michael, in the front. Are you sitting in the table there?
Thank you very much. I think he's got a good 10 or 15 years on me, Donna, but thanks.
All right, well, technical difficulties. It's awfully small on my screen, but that is completely fine. I was trying to get to slideshow, but it won't go from.
There you go.
Is it? Oh, that's not at the beginning, so I don't know why it's going in the middle.
We can go back.
All right, well, what my little mouse won't let me go back.
Here, how about I do it?
Again, yeah, there you go.
I don't know what's going on. All right, so it was going to be short. Now I just took up some more time. Let's go to the first slide, Megan, which is just a very simple agenda, which is just a quick project update because there's some really cool stuff that's been happening to get to this point. We have a little fiscal impact, which is our budget for the project, and then obviously our recommendation. All right, so I'll tell you oh, you're going awfully fast, Megan. As we go through and there's only 4 pictures for you, but everything we've done, each decision that was made in the development of the new community center project was very well thought out. And there's a reason behind each decision that was made during the design process. We do have two of our advisory committee members, and that is Council members Colson and Ortiz, who've been along with us. So if there's any specific design questions, they would be able to help with that. Some of the things we thought very hard about was the location of the community center, the use of underground parking, the shape and feel of the new community center, and the components within the community center. So we've picked 4 renderings. There are actually quite a few more that were developed by Group 4 for the Capital Campaign Committee. And when they roll out their fundraising component, you'll be able to see all the other renderings, which are really nice. But Megan, you can go to the first one just to give you an update. So this is the exterior of the building. What's important to remember is it's basically generally where the existing building entrance is. But what the big difference is, our building right now opens pretty much to Burlingame Avenue primarily. And what the new building does is it opens to the park. And that was being mindful of our neighbors and the noise that we do have from our current rental space. You can go to the next picture, Megan. Inside, this is the Creative Art Studio, and it's on the first floor, but there are many active spaces, multi-use spaces for the classes and meetings and rentals that the rec center is known, or the new community center will be known for. The next slide, please. The other thing that comes with this room, with this building, is an active lounge. And we're calling it an active lounge, but really it's for our senior population. It is designated for our senior population. The current building shuffles them around, and this space will always be available, as well as many of the classrooms for the different programs that we put on for our senior population. But this will be a place to just come and hang out, meet your neighbors, and get support from us, and play games and watch TV. And then the last slide, because I said we were only going to do 4. This is a really cool view, but one of the other things that was very mindful in the design process was how we opened to the park. We didn't go with the traditional looking building like the library. We went with a more modern look, but what it has is large windows that embrace the park. So it brings the outside inside and inside outside. So it's very cool. But those are all the pictures. I'm going to let you guys wait and see the rest of them when they come down, and I'll make sure I'll send you the link to the fundraising website. But as you know, getting into the staff report, our contractors were pre-qualified, and that was to ensure quality general contractors. We had 7 firms submit proposals, and 4 were pre-qualified. Of the 3 that submitted proposals on March 24th, we received 3 bids. I do want to mention that our bid date was extended from February 27th, and this was to allow for the consultants to make changes to the construction documents, which basically included additional foundation work to withstand sea level rise and a higher water table. And while it did extend the project start date, which it makes more critical to get under the way because we have a shorter window of time until the rainy season, but it was very important for the longevity of the building. Megan, can you go to the next slide, please? So on here, you'll see the bid contract number is the low bid. And what we put up was the entire cost estimate for the project, which is just over 52 million. While that's the case, we have actually spent over $1 million to get to this point. So the remaining budget required for this project is about $49,571,000. Now, the other thing you'll notice on the chart and on the screen is it also includes the photovoltaic panels. So I'm sure you'll remember we were talking about doing it either a low or no interest loan or grants. And Segal was a great help. Actually, it wasn't Segal, it was Andrea Papajohn, was a great help researching for those possibilities, and they are out there and they exist. The challenge is we were too far for installation. They are looking between like 9 months to a year of an installation, and we can't install until the building is built. So the infrastructure for the system is part of the construction contract, but the panels themselves are the $1.1 million. So our goal still in the end is to either do a low or no interest loan or get grant monies for that, which would also reduce the total project upfront costs as we go forward. If you could go to the next slide, Megan, please. All right, cool, thank you. So we're recommending the council approve the low bid, which is BHM. What was really great is the base bid came in below the engineer's estimate by 2.5%. But with it, we had 4 add alternates. You'll see them on the screen. The first one was exterior toe kick lighting. And what that is, it's located along the recessed seat walls in the courtyards of the community hall in the tech room. It was a way to reduce some of the cost, and so that was put in as an alternate. The Kidstown green roof was also done as an alternate. This is the planting of the roof, the irrigation. The substructure for the roof, for it to be planted in the future, is part of the base bid. Our capital campaign committee may have a lead on a possible way to help fund that portion of the project. It is not something that needs to be decided immediately because it comes at the very end of the project. There was actually no additional cost for the metal ceilings. And what we were looking at and what's preferred is like wood. It has an acoustical backing instead of the wood like metal, but we thought it might be a lesser cost, but it ended up being a wash. But for the wood ceiling, which is preferred by the consultants, it actually has a slightly better acoustical dampening component also. So I think staying with the original bid is what's recommended by the consultants. And the last one was a partition, which is not a big purchase. The space for the partition is part of the base bid. It can easily be added at any time in the future once the building is done. And so it doesn't need to be decided tonight either. What in the resolution, when you look at it, you will notice that you have the option to approve all of them, none of them, some of them. There's the option of if there's funds available in the contingency fund when we get closer to the end that they could be put in at that time. But that is up to the council to decide. We are available. I don't know if anybody has questions about the project.
Myself, yes.
Excellent.
I was talking, just self-muted. Thank you for the great presentation and the overview and the detailed staff report, which we all had a chance to review in advance. Colleagues, does anyone have questions about the presentation, the budget, the ad alternates at this time? And I see, and you mentioned that none of these are extremely time sensitive in the ad alternates. Is that accurate, Director Glomstead?
Yeah, the one, the toe kick does have a little bit more of a time sensitivity. That would be within 3 months of start of construction, because there's some infrastructure that needs to go in when the concrete is poured. But George was estimating we have at least 3 months out if we're interested in adding that.
Okay, and I noticed the summary that you had also of the remaining, the budget to be spent also addresses contingencies are included in that as well. So,
yeah.
My one other question, maybe this is for the city manager or for you, as we think about construction and in the context of COVID-19, essential construction. What are staff's thoughts on this particular project and how that falls into a category for public works?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So under the health order issued by the county health officer, essential public works infrastructure projects can continue. Our recreation center serves as a center in a disaster. It's an area where people can congregate, it's an evacuation center. And so we need to keep this project going. So we believe it is essential because of its role in disasters. So if there's an earthquake or wildfires or any other big disaster, this is a place that people can go and they can get food and they can get shelter, not overnight shelter, but they can go and get taken care of. So there's a list of projects that we're maintaining that are all essential, that are continuing despite the shelter in place order.
Thank you for that comment. Colleagues, any other questions before we open up to public? I am not seeing any hands up unless I'm missing them. So,
I think
Madam
Mike
City Clerk, do you?
has his
Oh,
hand
I'm
up.
sorry, yes, Councilmember Brown.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor, and maybe we'll take public comment, but I'll just go ahead and speak. First of all, on the question of the add-ons, I actually don't know what a toe kick light is, but the other ones all strike me as very sensible decisions to make, to go ahead and add it. You know, in its considered on itself, it's a big number, 170,000, but out of the project total, it's not. And it just strikes me as do it right the first time. So I would be in favor of each of the addendum, including toe kick step lights, which I don't even know what they are, but.
You know, Megan can, on the PowerPoint, Megan, there is one of the hidden slides that shows what the toe kick looks like at the very end. If you're able to pull that up, you'll be able to see what it's an underlight. So just go down past the last, or down past the.
Technical difficulty.
It's okay, I'm not feeling so bad now. My whole screen disappeared.
Everybody close your eyes so you don't see it.
She didn't mean she wanted you to do a toe kick, Megan.
See the picture? There you go.
There
That's
we go.
toe kick lighting.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm in favor of the addenda, just so we get that off the table. On a more substantive note, I just wanted to comment that it was important to us, or I think to all of us, that this project create benefits for our community and also for our workforce. And for various reasons, we didn't do the more elaborate contract agreement, but it was important. I'll just speak for myself, but I'm sure I speak for everybody. It was important to me to make sure that not only the contractor, the general contractor, but also the subcontractors actually pay prevailing wage. There are all too many stories of people who say they're paying prevailing wage and then don't. And paperwork gets fudged and people look the other way. And so I just want to confirm with Director Glomstad that we are going above and beyond. We're not simply accepting the general contractor's assertion that prevailing wages are being paid by the subcontractors. Have I got that right?
That is correct. We, George Sand, who's on this meeting with us, is our construction, or part of our construction management firm. We have talked to him and John Hughes is part of the same firm. What we were planning to do, no matter what.
Can I just interrupt for a second, because not everybody, so our construction management firm, just so I'm clear, is somebody who we pay, who reports to us. That's different than the general contractor, who's the one doing the actual field work and coordinating the work at, you know, the actual building of the project, right? I just wanted to make sure people understood the terms.
Yeah. Our construction manager is independent of the general contractor as well as the architectural team. They and their firm are there to be our advocates. We've already worked very well with them for the first phase, which is the playground and sports court. So they're there to help us. And one of the things they will be doing is, even though BHM will be doing, they have 3 staff members and they focus on prevailing wage and, you know, of the compliance of their projects. They will be, the subs will compile stuff. It goes to BHM. They will be confirming it. It will end up coming to the city. And what normally is we would keep it. It goes to the DIR too, and the DIR, they're back checking everything also. But we're going to do some random audits, and it will be different ones each month. We'll pick a different trade depending on what's being worked on in the building at any given time. And we'll do some of our own investigation, talking to the people out there working to make sure they're getting paid the wage that's stated on the wage forms. is our goal. And if we find anything, then George will of course bring that to our attention.
So I am pleased to hear that, and I'm just going to repeat it, which is BHM is the general contractor. They are legally required to make sure that their subs pay prevailing wage on a project like this. But all too often, we've heard stories, not actually about the city of Burlingame, but other contractors who, when folks go around and actually talk to the folks doing the work, they're being paid well below prevailing wage. And that's just theft, and it's outrageous. And I know none of us wants to be a part of that. So not only are we going to rely on the general contractor, BHM, to attest to the subcontractors and prevailing wage, but we will independently do spot checks, random anonymous spot checks to be able to go and talk to the workers in the field and make sure they're being paid fairly, right?
That is correct.
That's great. I'm really pleased about that. And then just briefly, do we have a commitment from the contractor and the subs to use apprentices and help build the construction workforce of the future?
Yes, we do. Actually, talking to George, and so they do. The contract. So all the subs have a contract with BHM, and in their contract with BHM, they are required, and as part of one of their appendixes, Appendix B. They need to use specific apprentice form, which is a DAS 140. And it specifies the amount of journeyman hours and apprenticeship hours each subcontractor will be using on the project. And so they'll be monitoring that. But in addition, we have our construction management team, and they will also be making sure that we have the apprentices that are supposed to be used in the right ratios based on what's required on the form.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg, for the questions. You jumped a little bit on our deliberations, but we're glad you asked those important questions as well. Do colleagues have, we have Vice Mayor has a question for staff.
Yes, so one question. So when you look at the alternatives and the prices that are mentioned on the staff report, if we decide to wait on that, to make that decision a little bit later, those prices stay the same?
Yeah, they're part of the, I believe so. Unless, if that is correct.
I just wanted to double check
George,
that.
Yeah, if George doesn't pop in right now, then that is correct. George?
We'll give George a minute
I'll text him.
to confirm or deny. All right, then we will take it that that's part of the bid contract. So if we decided to include those later, as long as it fits within the construction phasing, it sounds like that's what staff is suggesting, that would be the price. Other questions from colleagues? I had a question just as far as actual timing of construction. And I understand from learning a little bit more at the Parks and Recreation meeting as well, the commission meeting, you folks are well underway moving out. We're paying for portables. There's worker bees happening behind the scenes to get ready for this transition. But as far as if this contract were approved, there'll probably be still some timing that has to go into place, but conceivably, if you could tell us a little bit about the timing.
So once the council approves it, there's at least about a 10-day period where the contract documents, the bonds, and all the insurance has to get finalized. And then after the notice to proceed is issued, it'll probably be about another 10 days to 2 weeks to ramp up. And that would just start with construction fencing and the trailers, construction trailers. And then the actual in the ground construction would start after that. I don't envision if we are towards the end of April now, hopefully by, in the best of times, I'm hoping by the middle or late May, we'll have a shovel in the ground. The most important thing for us to move swiftly right now is we're digging down for the garage portion. And we need to get that buttoned up before the rains come. This coming winter, it seems like it's a long time, but this is our the best time to get out there and get it done. So our fingers are crossed. We won't have early rains this coming year, and we'll be ready to go as soon and swiftly as possible. BHM, I've spoken with them. They sound like a very committed partner. So I think we'll have a good working relationship to move this project forward smoothly.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the summer months are always critical months in California for construction. You mentioned the bonds will be finalized, but we went out for a number of months ago because it was so favorable as far as the bond market, but that financing's already been secured, correct?
Not those bonds, like builders bonds. There's
builders bonds. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just so that the public are clear that all that due diligence was done long in advance. Okay, if colleagues don't have any additional questions at this time, I think what we'll do is open it up to members of the public who might be interested in this item. So, Madam City Clerk.
There are no public comments.
No public comments on this item. All right. Thank you for that. Colleagues, time to deliberate. I guess what we've certainly been working on this for many, many years, and extra special thanks to Council Members Colson and Ortiz who have shepherded this final phase, and certainly folks that have been on council even longer than Council Member Colson and I have been on have seen this project for many years beforehand, and all the public members who had advised this. But I guess we have some decisions to make tonight, not only to consider the contract approval, but as far as the add-ons to consider. So do we have any other opinions on those? If not, I've got a question. It seems to me that there's a few add alternates totaling $171,000. I am mindful that this is an expensive project, and I like that we can maybe wait to make some decisions. I'd like to hear, I guess a question I forgot to ask is Director Glomsted's thoughts on the least expensive add-on, which is the toe kick lighting, which seems to me there could be some safety value at night. And if you had any thoughts on that, is that one that you would prioritize because it may have to be decided within the first 3 months of construction? Or maybe it sounds like Councilmember Colson would like to comment on that first.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and comment on it for two reasons. I think it's important. First of all, I do think safety is a really important part of it, but also I think that we do have homes right around the property, and so low level safety lighting that emits sort of from the ground, as opposed to having and installing, say 10 more overhead lights or bigger lights that are shining up into the hills, shining into the neighbors' houses. I think this is not only a safety measure, but it's a courtesy measure for the people who live around the park.
Yeah. I can see that. I could see supporting particularly that add alternate. My gut says I'd like to hold off if we don't need to decide now on the green roof, which is another $112,000, or the partition, because that's something we could decide later, particularly with the new economic landscape. I see Councilmember Brownrigg's point that in the grand scheme of a very expensive project, it's not going to make or break, but I would definitely have no problem supporting the toe kick lighting. And I'm curious to see if other colleagues, whether you feel like we should wait and see if the fundraising kicks in for the green roof or the partition, or if we should approve it now. Other thoughts? Vice Mayor?
Yes, I think actually, since we're looking at this now, I would rather look at the whole package. And I agree with my colleague, Councilmember Brownrigg, that in the whole scheme of things, this sounds pretty reasonable, and I would rather approve everything right now.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Well said, Vice Mayor. I'm going to agree with everything you just said. So I'm with it. I like the again, especially the green roof is one of those that we need to lead by example and build green infrastructure, and I think that that's a great way to do it. But let me say this, because I sat in early 2014 and the CAC, and we started with the Vice Mayor and a big group of people. I am so excited to be here today And I'm even more excited of the thought of being mayor when I get to cut the ribbon. So
Oh.
yes, I went there. Yeah. So, but anyway, this is
You
really
have got-
exciting. I think exactly what Councilmember Brownrigg said. This is very small in relation to the full project. I think it's time we just get it all done and move forward.
You've got a great sense of timing, my friend.
And I see Councilmember Coulson has some thoughts on this matter as well.
Let me get that. Yes, I'll support. I agree. I think it's easier to just put all 4 of these in a package. And I know in terms of the fundraising for us, if we know the direction it's going, it's easier for us to develop our materials. It's easier for us to put our website together and just kind of have the whole comprehensive package that we're working on as part of the fundraising team for this. And I'm also, I'm just incredibly excited. I think one thing that has really become apparent to me is that when you are sheltering in place, you really lose the heart of the community is so important. And I really think when we come out of this in a year or whatever, having this exciting new project to look forward to, a community gathering space, a heart of the community, a place where people can go of all ages and recreate and share again is just a light at the end of the tunnel and something that we can all celebrate and look forward to celebrating. And the timing is really going to be right on. So it couldn't, in my opinion, be coming at a better time.
Thank you for that comment. Would someone then, with the great deliberations and huge thanks to colleagues who have shepherded this and staff who've shepherded this construction project, this vision forward so many years, would someone like to propose a motion to adopt the resolution to get this contract going?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to adopt the low bid contract as proposed by Director Glomstead and the city staff, along with the add alts as proposed in the contract.
Second.
Okay, I see Councilmember Ortiz seconded that. The 2 members of the committee there with all add alternates added on. Let's take a roll call vote.
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Brownrigg.
can I ask the maker of the motion if she would be willing to add to her motion an endorsement of those 2 labor practices that we discussed a few minutes ago?
100%. Oh, and Margaret, is that okay? Can we do that?
Yeah, I just want, before you finish that motion, I need to clarify one of the alternates, but go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So yes, predicated on Margaret's clarification of that add alt, I would also add to the motion that the council endorses the process by which we will be verifying prevailing wages are in fact being paid, and that if there is any malfeasance on that, we would immediately correct that.
Thank you.
And Director Glomstead, would you like to comment on the add alt number 3?
Yeah, I just want to confirm with our architects, and she's just texting right now, that we want to approve it as is because it's listed in the staff report as interior metal ceilings, and I know they want the wood ceilings instead.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so it's
that's
the
what
4 adults with the elimination of the metal wood ceiling and including the wood.
The woods, we want the wood ceiling, not the
Yeah.
metal ceiling. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have that motion amended, and we have the second where
Second amended.
his head, and so we'll take a roll call vote.
Can I have a clarification?
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor.
So if it is going to be the wood, is the price correct?
Yeah, but it doesn't change.
Okay, just want to make sure it's correct. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. Our motion carries and project shall begin. So thank you, colleagues, for that and your hard work. We'll move on at this time to item number 10B, where we will consider a resolution to approve a small business support program and criteria for Burlingame Back in Business Grant Program in response to COVID-19 public health emergency. And again, we give extra special thanks to 3 colleagues actually at this point that helped prepare the final details of the staff report. Certainly Councilmember Colson and Brownrigg have been driving this, the vision for this entire program. And then as the Kickstart Burlingame gift card program came into shape, we know that Councilmember Ortiz stepped in and assisted Councilmember Brownrigg in finalizing the additional proposal. So with that, we'll turn it over to, I see the Vice Mayor has a comment. Yes.
Yes, so I, since the last time we spoke on this item, I was actually put on a subcommittee to work on this at the county level. So I will need to recuse myself from voting on this item.
Okay, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, on this. So with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager for any general framing, and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you, Mayor Beach, members of the council. I'm actually presenting 2 items tonight that really go hand in hand. The first one we're talking about is support for small businesses. But within that staff report talking about small businesses is really kind of a bridge program. It's the Kickstart Burlingame idea, which helps our small business community, but also individuals in the community who are lower income. And then that bridges over to our next item, which we'll take up after this, which is really potentially providing support for individuals in the community who are really struggling with rental payments, utility payments, food insecurity, things like that. But I will get to that one later. At your March 25th meeting, you agreed to the formation of a subcommittee to develop programs to assist our small business community. And as you mentioned, Mayor Beach, we had Councilmembers Brownrigg and Colson who volunteered to serve on this committee. And they did that because they are the liaisons to the Burlingame SFO Chamber of Commerce. They had a huge number of meetings virtually over those couple weeks before April 6th, when they brought back a proposal, which is in your packet tonight. They met with businesses, local and regional business support organizations, city staff, and they developed that document that you reviewed at your last meeting on April 6th. And again, it's in your packet. So there was a number of programs, and the council actually approved by motion a number of the programs, but for paperwork purposes and tracking, I wanted to bring them back into a resolution so we could just have everything in one place and have a formal resolution talking about what we have. So what you approved on April 6th was $5,000 to SAMCETA to assist with advisory assistance to Burlingame businesses. So SAMCETA is helping folks get through the morass of paperwork and figure out what all the various programs are. There's so many different programs floating around there. Some of them have run out of money. Federal programs like the PPP and EIDL, EIDL. Those, it looks like we'll get some additional funding through the feds, which may or may not get voted on tomorrow in the Senate. We'll see. There's lots of discussions going on in DC, but in any case, it's complicated. We also, just as an aside, I've asked Joe Sanfilippo, our economic development specialist, to work on getting information out to our business community. So after this meeting, and depending on what you decide to do with our small business grant program, he will be putting together information, and then Joe and members of the library staff, and probably Segal as well, because she has some capacity, will be calling our businesses and reaching out directly to talk about different programs that they can apply for. So that should be helpful to everyone. So that was number 1 that you approved. Number 2 was payment of the annual fees for the downtown Burlingame Business Improvement District and the Broadway Area Business Improvement District for the next fiscal year. So it's approximately $90,000 for downtown and approximately $23,000 for Broadway. And you may recall, I think it was at your last meeting, the Broadway came forward and said, we want to just forego our assessments for the next year. So the council would be making that up. The city would be making that up. The other thing you agreed to was waiving parking meter fees for 2 weeks after the shelter in place order is lifted. We don't know what the cost of that is. On a normal month, we make about 200,000 from our parking meter fees. We are not in a normal month. 2 weeks would not be half of a normal month. It'll be something less than that, but we really just don't know. Really depends on how the shelter in place order is lifted, what businesses are able to come back, how many people feel comfortable coming back out and shopping. So there's some amount of revenue foregone, but we just don't know what that is. And then you tentatively approved a small business grant program in the amount of 500,000 and a Kickstart Burlingame debit card program in the amount of 250,000. And that both of those programs required a little bit more research and development to see how we could make those work. And as you mentioned, Mayor Beach, Council Members Brownrigg and Ortiz were tasked with figuring out the Kickstart Burlingame program. So on the small business grant program, it's now called Burlingame Back in Business. You have a document put together by the subcommittee of Council Members Brownrigg and Colson talking about what Burlingame Back in Business is. And once I finish the staff report, I'll ask them to talk to you about that program. They're continuing to work out the details. It looks like Samcita will be able to manage that for us. So I believe Councilmember Colson can speak to that. She's had a number of conversations with Roseanne Faust. Samcita, as you recall, is managing the SMC Strong Fund, which the County Board of Supervisors seeded with $3 million, and $1 million of that is going to business support. And tomorrow, the Board of Supervisors will be voting on how that business support program will be administered. Our criteria differed a little bit from the county's draft criteria. I've not had a chance to go back on the county website to see if what I saw last week matches what their Board of Soups is voting on tomorrow. But what they were looking at last week was considering businesses with up to $2.5 million in gross revenues and or 1 to 10 full-time equivalent positions. A lot of our businesses, particularly some of our bigger restaurants, would be eliminated from applying for this program because they actually have higher gross revenues, even though restaurant business is so difficult and they really are struggling and, you know, margins can be low, they actually make higher gross revenues. So they would be eliminated from even applying for that program. But we wanted to be able to serve some of our larger businesses, not our really massively large businesses, but our kind of, you know, medium, slightly more employees, slightly higher gross revenues. So I will let the council members talk about how that will work out, but it looks like San Mateo Credit Union and Samcita should be able to help us with that. So if this is still a go, you have in your resolution approval of the $500,000 for that program. And then the other one is this Kickstart Burlingame debit card program. And this would help the neediest families and also provide a boost to local businesses. And the idea is to provide $250 gift cards or virtual gift cards to families. And we would get the information. Actually, we wouldn't get it. We would ask Peninsula Clean Energy to secure that information. They can use their folks who are getting lower rates on energy because of their socioeconomic status. Those folks would be able to get these cards, and then we would turn to Burlingame School District for additional folks. The idea is that we would give out 1,000 of these for 250,000 total. We are hoping to limit that to spending in Burlingame, and there's some good work and a matrix put together by Council Members Brownrigg and Ortiz talking about the different options, and some of them let you limit the geography for where you can spend the gift cards and some do not. And so they can let us all know how they've figured that all out. I did receive an email right before your closed session earlier this evening from Tish Bissell, who is representing St. Paul's, and they are excited about partnering with us for distributing the gift cards. So that's great news. And I know I saw Tish is on the meeting tonight. So if you have any questions for her, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer for you. So just in terms of fiscal impact, we talked at our last meeting about drawing down the Economic Stability Reserve. And so the Samcita is $5,000. Then you have another $500 for small business and $250. So this fiscal year, which we have another few months left on, would be $755,000 from the Economic Stability Reserve. The payment of the bid fees would actually come out of next year's budget, and that is $115,000 approximately. So your grand total is $870,000 plus whatever comes out of the parking fund for the waiver of the meter fees. And with that, I think I will stop talking and ask council members Colson and Brownrigg to talk us through the small business grant program. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, can I start?
I was going to ask you to. That's great.
Oh, okay, great. No problem. Thank you so much. So we had an opportunity to work really closely with SAMCETA, and I do want to thank Roseanne and Dawn for their innovative and thoughtful get it done attitude that they really had on this, and wanting to set this up as a model that other cities could follow. So the way this is going to have to work, the applications are going to have to come in. The SAMCETA Strong Fund will be taking applications from all over the county. What we'll be doing is encouraging all the Burlingame businesses that are interested in applying. We anticipate that around $50,000 of SAMCETA, SMC Strong funding would be allocated because it's per capita on the $1 million. We're about 5% of the county population, so we'll probably have around $50,000 allocated. What we're suggesting is that they first screen all the applicants off of that pool, and then anyone that doesn't meet the criteria, for example, if they have over 2.5 in gross revenue or more employees, because they would actually kick out of their pool and into the Burlingame pool. So when we send, we're going to have to do some really good work to market and message to people that please don't give up. If you see the SAMCETA criteria that for the Strong Fund, know that Burlingame has a wider set of criteria that is to encompass a little bit larger businesses. And we then follow pretty much the same, have a valid Burlingame business license, have been open for business at least 1 year as of April 1st, 2020, have no more than 5 million in gross annual revenue. We think that captures most of our restaurants and some of our retailers. Have a retail storefront that is open to the public, that provides products and or personal services. So for example, manicure, pedicure, massage therapist, and hair salon, for example, but it excludes professional services like law firms and real estate agents, where we just felt like the nexus here is we're trying to give out money that will kickstart the business to get the sales tax ramped up in downtown Burlingame, which then allows us to invest and continue to do our good park and rec work and our library and our other things. So we really wanted the businesses to have a pretty distinct nexus right into the sales tax element. And then they would have to have just demonstrate that they've been impacted by COVID-19 shelter-in-place order, which is pretty easy, and then located within the Burlingame city limits. We provide some examples of the kinds of documentation that's consistent with what SAMCETA and the San Mateo Credit Union will be looking for. And then the grant amount would be the equivalent of 2 months operating expenses, determined by taking an average of the last 12 months of operations as of 3/1/2020, not to exceed 10,000 and subject to availability of funds. We will open our application tomorrow. The county is looking at their version of this, and we'll hopefully get it approved. One thing that we did manage to get taken out, they had a criteria around nothing more than 100,000 in net operating income, but Michael and I spent some pretty serious time explaining to SAMCETA how net operating income can be manipulated, whether the proprietor's salary is included in there. Are they running business expenses like cars and different things through? And we just felt that that was kind of an apples to orange comparison, and they agreed with us ultimately and removed that. But the applications would come in. They would be deemed complete by the credit union underwriting committee, and then will be reviewed by the independent committee of SAMCETA and members for awards. In the event of oversubscription, applications would be prioritized based on the probability of successful business continuity after the shelter-in-place order is lifted, and to maintain the diversity of Burlingame businesses. So in other words, we would want, some retailers, some personal service type organizations. There would probably be some, restaurants. We wouldn't want it to all be one type of business. And we will give them discretion to sort of work with that within, and they really, we talked to them extensively about this, and I feel very strongly that they have a good sense of how that would work. And then again, the process would be all businesses would be encouraged to apply. If they, regardless of whether they meet the established screening criteria set by SMC Strong, the City of Burlingame criteria is intended to include the broader range of businesses. Those small businesses that do not receive an SMC grant would be moved automatically into the Burlingame applicant pool for consideration. One other thing that we included in this that SAMCETA did not, at least they hadn't had it in the last time we talked, they may change it tomorrow, but within 6 months of the award, the City of Burlingame would like to reserve the right to contact the business owner and request follow-up information as to how the funds were actually deployed, and to report back to the council so that we can report back to the council as to the efficacy of the grant program. I just Michael and I both thought it was really important not to take taxpayer revenue, invest into something that we hope is going to continue our business without having some sort of accountability and report out to our constituents to let them know, maybe 10% of the businesses actually failed after 6 months anyway, but that's okay. We understand that's a possibility, but we feel that we need that transparency and analysis. So in the event this ever happens again, we have some feedback and data as to what worked well and what didn't. So with that, I think maybe we take them one at a time. So maybe Michael and I can answer questions.
Mayor Beach, you're muted.
Thank you. Just want a huge thanks to colleagues, Councilmember Brownrigg and Coulson, for your hard work on this and the great presentation, and staff support of working through all these details. Colleagues, do we have questions? Because this is, I think, a good pause point related to the program. I guess it's really Councilmember Ortiz and me. I do have a question. Is there an ability, some constituents have asked for, or is there a possibility that this fund that will be set aside at SAMCETA for Burlingame businesses, will there be opportunities for Burlingame constituents to contribute to it, to enlarge that pool dedicated to Burlingame businesses, or is it just not set up to direct?
We actually asked Roseanne this question, and residents can put in funding. Right now they can pick whether it wants to go, there's 3 different areas it can go to nonprofits. And it seemed in talking to Roseanne that if constituents were interested in this, we could certainly, have a portal through which donations could be made directly to SAMCETA, which is nice. The program it's a nonprofit, so you get a tax exempt status right off on that. And then they could, those could be restricted to the City of Burlingame.
That's great if that can be explored or teased out, because I think there may be some constituents that would be interested. My other question, I would like to understand a little bit about the criteria. Will it be sort of and they'll work through this like a weighted scoring position, but was there any additional thoughts to how long a business license holder, should it be a year or longer? Or did a year seem like it seemed like you guys settled on a year rather than a longer standing business? Just help me understand the thinking behind that.
Actually, we looked at it actually even shorter than a year, because we were trying to grapple with brand new businesses that maybe came in and are providing essential services, really critical. We didn't want to exclude them. And after a long, kind of a long discussion with both our staff and with SAMCETA, we decided that those businesses are probably fairly well capitalized because they are brand new. So they have, most likely investors or people, and a lot of them seem to have hopped right to it and gotten on board. So we felt like they would actually probably be in a better position to self-finance and self-capitalize, and we had to draw a line somewhere. So we think that there are just as many relatively new businesses in this town within the past, say, 3 to 5 years as there are long-standing favorites. And again, I think that it was really just important that everybody have equal access, especially as we're learning that the SB loans, the PPP loans, and the EIDL loans are not making it into the hands of these small businesses. And, also just by broad comparison, we did talk to the Facebook people about the small business program that they're putting in. They cannot handle us in their program. So I'm really glad SAMCETA can. Funny enough, the firm that's implementing it for them, Eureka, gives a Burlingame business address. So I want to find out if they're actually here in Burlingame. It would be interesting if a Burlingame business was doing this global implementation for them, just to find out if they're there. But I think that our sense was that we wanted it to be a pretty level playing field with regard to that.
Thank you for that.
Michael. Yeah.
Okay. Michael, you want to add to that? And then I see the city manager had their hand up.
I just briefly wanted to well, first of all, commend Councilwoman Coulson for a ton of spade work in this whole project. But early on, as we were trying to conceive it, we conceived of a much more elaborate scoring system, which might include, for example, whether the business has been a contributor to local charities and that sort of thing. And what we realized after a time was that it was going to become more complex and in some funny way more subjective, the more of those kind of squishier criteria you tried to add. And so I think in the end, settling on the two big criteria: one, do you have a pretty good chance of succeeding, because there's no point in writing taxpayer subsidies to a business that's not going to succeed, and two, will it protect Burlingame's diversity of business? And I think, as Councilwoman Coulson and I were talking through the different criteria, those really kept rising to the top of where we'd like to see public money go to make sure we have a healthy community. And then, just since I have the mic, I'd point out that I think since we last talked about this, I think initially we said the grant range might be between 5 and 20, and we ultimately agreed with SAMCETA's decision to cap at 10. Frankly, just so we could help more businesses. So, I very much expect us to be oversubscribed. As Councilwoman Coulson points out, sadly, a number of our small businesses have tried to apply for PPP loans, and the story over and over again is that they haven't been successful. They can't even get people to return their calls. So I think this program could have even more utility than we expected at the beginning. And so to try to make it simple and try to, this will cover 50 businesses basically.
Possibly more.
That's true, right?
Because some of the very small businesses, like we kind of considered like a small, we talked to Roseanne about this, a small in-home daycare that is open, like takes public applications from 6 to 12 children, might have a very tiny need, like a $2,500 grant would be 2 times their monthly expenses for, say, one additional person that was working in that center. And, they may not need 10,000 or qualify. So there may be some smaller, tinier businesses that we can really help and then layer on the bigger ones.
Thank you for that insight. Madam City Manager, did you have another, I see your hand up.
Sure, just back on the 1 year thing. I think part of what council members were trying to do was mirror the SAMCETA SMC Strong program as much as possible, with the nuances of what works for Burlingame. And so that was the time frame that SAMCETA came up with, is the 1 year. And we don't want to get too complicated with them and too many differences, or else it's impossible for them to administer on our behalf. And so, you know, that old saying, keep it simple, stupid, is in play here. We want to be, you know, match as much as we can while still recognizing that some of our businesses are just a little bit bigger.
Councilwoman Colson, did she just call us stupid?
I did not.
The acronym is
General milieu.
simple, stupid. Yes, I see.
Brilliant.
Councilmember Ortiz had a comment. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that having gone through the PPP program and lived and done nothing else for the last 2 weeks, I would say it's really important that we have a very transparent method of prioritizing these requests, so that if it, in fact, it does get oversubscribed, the people who are left without it are very clear of how we got to where we got, because that didn't happen with PPP, and it's very unfortunate. So,
Yeah.
But thank you guys. I think that sounds like a great program, and I'm really, really happy about it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for that. And we know that our vice mayor is recused right now. So let's see if we don't have any other further questions. We'll see if there's members.
Can I also make one other thing clear, which is the PPP program, you know, allowed you to kind of break up little businesses. And so if you have a business on the avenue, say you're like Sephora and you only have 20 employees there, we are really focusing our business, we're not doing that. I look at the whole business. So if you're a big major chain like a Pottery Barn or a Sephora, to me, you have your revenues are for the whole company, not just the Burlingame store. So I do want to make sure that we don't end up in the same conundrum that the feds ended up with. And I want to make that really clear, and we'll confirm that again with Roseanne. So it's not your Burlingame location, it is your overarching parent company that has to apply.
Thank you for that comment and clarification. Okay, Madam City Clerk, do you have members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
We had a couple comments that came in that deal with both 10B and 10C, so I'll read them now. So we had one email that came in from one of our residents, Marcia. She says, I am a 31-year resident and homeowner in Burlingame. I urge you to seriously consider providing assistance to our most financially needy citizens, as well as small businesses in distress, an important part of our vibrant community. I don't know how you would determine who qualifies regarding businesses, so presume you would communicate that quickly to our public should you agree to such a plan. In any case, I urge you to put rigorous and easily understandable criteria in place for identifying possible recipients. Also, solid metrics for measuring success must be put in place regarding businesses. Example, they continue to pay their payroll, they use funds to contribute healthcare for payroll, they retain acceptable credit metrics, they meet production goals, committed to achieve with monies received from city funds, etc. This is most important for our low-income population, and our businesses are needed to provide for all of us. And then we also got a comment from one of our residents, Marilyn. She says, I understand that your agenda includes an item to help Burlingame small businesses. I would be especially interested in helping those who didn't get into the big national SBA program. As I walk around Broadway or Burlingame Avenue and side streets, I'm saddened by the closed or moved out businesses. Thank you. And then I believe you all received an emails from Cindy Cornell with her comments on both of these items.
Yes, and at this point, I was primarily focused, that's totally fine that we read both those items. I just wanted to give the public the opportunity to speak on the Back in Business Grant Fund. It sounds like we don't have any additional comments on that right now. Then let's come back into council deliberations. It sounds like there's general support for this program. if we can kind of get some at least head nods in this section, then maybe we can move on to, yes, and it looks like we have head nods and thumbs up with the two committee members who put it together, and Councilmember Ortiz and I are thumbs up as well. And we really, again, sincerely thank you for the incredibly thoughtful work on it. And it sounds like we have support from the community as well to consider this program to help our small businesses. Let's talk, if it's okay right now, Madam City Manager, and to the committee members to address the Kickstart Burlingame. Is that the next best section of the program?
That's the next one.
Councilmember Brownrigg, if you'd like to either kick us off.
I will, and then I'll turn over to Councilman Ortiz. So this was the notion of helping out needy families. We proposed 2 weeks ago using the utility PG&E screen for income. If you qualify for reduced utility rates, then you've had to prove that you are in a lower income status, and that seemed like a good pre-screen. And in the 2 weeks since, Councilman Ortiz and I have now put a lot of effort into actually figuring out how this program would work. And so I'm going to touch briefly on the way we would reach out to people. And then Councilman Ortiz will talk about how we do some of the security elements, and we'll finish up with a recommendation of the card to use. And as you'll see, if you looked at the matrix, no card is perfect, but ultimately we think there's a best choice. So it starts with, we had to ascertain that PCE would be willing to either share with us the account data, which we didn't think they would, or write to those members on our behalf. And they are willing to do that. They will assign a unique code to each letter. The recipient will receive the code and receive the letter that explains the program and how to collect their card, which we'll get to in a minute. And it will have a unique code so that when they come to collect their card, even though we don't know them by name because of the privacy issues, we know that they are a valid recipient of the card. We needed to find a partner with who would help us on the fulfillment side of this. And I am so pleased that Councilman Ortiz and I were able to work with St. Paul's and Home and Hope to develop a program that they will help us administer. And a great tip of the hat to Tish Bussell and Reverend Skillings and the whole vestry for putting a ton of thought into how to actually make this work mechanically. And I won't bore our colleagues with that, but it is elaborate. They envision it taking several days. They've thought about a lot of different issues, including security and just plain old logistics that we will meet with staff about if we get the green light to proceed. But it's a really solid plan that a lot of hours have been put into. Councilman Ortiz, do you want to talk a bit about the security of these cards?
Yeah, first of all, let me just say, I did get pulled into this PPP thing, and I spent a lot of time with that. So I got to say thank you to Councilmember Brownrigg for taking the lead on this. And I want to also say thank you to John Kavranian, who made a few calls and got us some information and moved the process along. So we have done a lot of homework. We've had a lot of conversations to try to arrive at something that makes sense. And it's partly keeping it, what was that word, Lisa? Keep it simple. But so, and I think after talking and going over it and trying to, keeping in mind what we're trying to accomplish and who we're trying to benefit from this, I think we've arrived at a very simple concept that I think is going to make a lot of sense. And I'm very pleased to have their partner, because without them, I don't know how we would get this done. Having said that, we did reach out to their bank, which is Boston Private, and they have agreed to help us with the storage of the cards, which was one of the issues that the banker and me was really struggling with, because just having those cards sitting around made me very nervous. They've agreed to put them in their vault and control them, and that is the bank that St. Paul uses, so it makes perfect sense. And I think that now I will sleep better now. So you want to get into how we got to the cards and what we're thinking?
Yeah, let me tee that up and then maybe let you bring that one home. So on the cards, you'll see if you looked at the matrix, there are different pros and cons. One of the things that we've been trying to do is to keep it simple, Senor. And so one of the issues with the two programs that we identified that would limit the spending to 94010 is that the team, our community would have to go out and recruit merchants. And it's not necessarily clear that the merchants where people would want to spend money would necessarily participate. Not clear that Walgreens corporate would be able to participate necessarily, or Safeway. And then it's just the challenge of getting all of the merchants to positively opt in. That's just a lot of paperwork that has to get filled out. And for some number of merchants, they're not even open right now. Not clear who you would talk to or how they would spend the money in potpourri if it's closed. So as we took a step back and we reflected that the program is meant to be a twofer, but it is meant in the first instance to help the neediest families in Burlingame at a very, very tough period. And if there's one thing we heard, actually, I think it was Councilwoman Colson and I heard this in a dialogue with the Chamber of Commerce. And what the hotel people said is all of our employees are using up their vacation and their sick days, and they're getting paid for April. But they're going to run through all of those days, and May is going to be a really hard month. And so what we're trying to do is help families who are at the bottom of the income ladder, about 1,000 families. And if that becomes our chief goal, then ultimately we got steered towards the card that has the most flexibility. Ricardo, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about, and I think there's something that the people at St. Paul brought up to us, is when we looked at the demographic that we're trying to serve, particularly seniors or immigrants with maybe limited language skills, the complexity of some of these programs was a little tricky for them to navigate. So we were trying to come up with just a simple card that you can give them. They can swipe it. That's easy, simple. They don't have to worry about it. And so that kind of narrowed the options down, and I think that we're coming up with a very simple process. Now, as much as I wanted to do something where we supported the Burlingame businesses, when I thought about what a needy family would do with the $250 card, I could only picture groceries, and so that would end up supporting groceries which have not been shuttered, which are still operating and probably having record months because everybody wants toilet paper. And so that's the one thing that we just kept thinking about it, how we were going to support our local merchants. And we just couldn't come up with a good answer. And so now we're just going to leave it open for these people to use wherever. But in the letter, we will encourage them to go to Burlingame and try to use their funds in Burlingame and explain that our local merchants are going through hard times as well.
Right. So just to wrap this up, so one of the things that both MasterCard and Visa experts told us is the fact is, if you give somebody a card, it may be used worldwide, but 70% of it will be spent where they live. I mean, that's what the data shows. So I think even if we don't positively restrict it to 94010, we can be confident that a great deal, the majority of the cash will be spent here in Burlingame. And so we do recommend the Visa card or MasterCard, but one that is not an opt-in by merchants, one that is broadly available. So now the way we would fulfill is we would get the cards from the company. We would have them in an envelope with a letter from the city that explains what the program is and that we hope that they spend it in Burlingame. We would have a chance in that envelope to include other information. So I would certainly propose inserting in the envelope a census and a message about the census. St. Paul's has figured out a very efficient system for having drive-through or walk-ups come through and have fulfillment and then crossed off the list of unique identifiers so that we don't double count. as noted earlier by the city manager, Ms. Bussell is on the phone in case anyone wants to dig in. I wouldn't necessarily encourage it because you can get really quickly into how many cones you're going to need and how many, sandwich boards and stuff, but feel free if you like. So that's the Kickstart Burlingame program. We're pretty excited about it and open to any questions.
Thank you for the hard work you've put in and all the thought on this. Colleagues, what questions? I guess the questions then really are left to Councilmember Coulson and me. Yes.
This is awesome. I love it. Thank you guys for working on it. I have just more of a thought than a question, which is, I think when we're reaching out to our merchants on this, our grant loan program, we should explain this card as well and what's going on. So they should be expecting it and know it and don't think it's a fraud, but they understand it. And maybe encourage them that, if you're Potpourri or the Runner's Mind and, maybe we should try to encourage them that if someone brings the card in, they would perhaps give a discount. Like, we'll give you 20% off, and it's their call. They make it, it's not a part of the deal, but is a way to encourage people and incentivize them to use it locally. So I think if we coordinate this with the grant program and we really try to say, hey, put a little sticker in your window when you open back up. And that's another thing, is these cards need to go out when Burlingame reopens. So I just want to make sure we don't get them out too early, because if we do, then you might have some of the, like, John Karanian's candy store is not quite open yet. It's not essential business. So I want to make sure that the non-essential businesses do get open and we time it right.
So if I could just, so that, let's have a dialogue, because it's tricky, right? We don't know when those are going to get lifted. And yet we know the need for the neediest families is like right now. So I just, to Councilman Ortiz's point that probably it's going to be spent mostly on basics, maybe, a few frivolous things, but I wonder if we really want to wait until, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand. I totally understand what you're saying.
But the one thing is,
but they could wait. In other words, sorry, Ricardo, didn't mean to interrupt
go
you,
ahead,
but we can send it out. They could certainly use it on that. But if, say, for example, they had food stamps and they're part of the, they have other resources through which they're acquiring food and basic necessities right now. If they wanted to wait because they had a special birthday coming up or something and wanted to be able to use it for a gift at Five Little Monkeys for their child.
Right. And I think it's a brilliant idea to try to loop merchants in and have them, again, if we can pull it off, we could have it as part of the letter.
Yes.
These are merchants who are willing to give you a discount if you go and patronize their store. So we can definitely try to get that included in the outbound messaging.
But by the time we put this all together and to the point where we're ready to fulfill the cards, we're still a few weeks out. So by then, hopefully we're open again and it'll meet the timing. But I'm with Councilmember Brownrigg. I think we need to act sooner than later because the need is now. And so I would move to just keep it moving as fast as possible.
So thank you for that. So I think what I want to make sure I understand what the recommendation is. There's three options here, but I think I heard you say that you folks recommend the Visa prepaid card, which would not be restricted to 90410. That's the one card that isn't restricted to 90410. Is that correct? So therefore it wouldn't be branded like the Burlingame gift card. At best, it would have maybe a sticker that could be put on it. Although if the goal really is, if we want to be sensitive to privacy too, we might not want to do that because these are Visa gift cards that are going to folks and being distributed. We want to be thoughtful about that, but we could put a sticker on the card. I guess my one question, and listening to you, I hear what you say, like as far as what's the simplest way to give folks, if your goal of the program is to not just, I mean, the vision of the program originally started, let's support 90410 businesses and let's support families in need. It sounds like the committee work has done a lot of thoughtful discussion and deliberation behind the scenes. And the goals are now shifting more towards helping needy families, because if it really were helping 90410, then we lean towards, I was actually expecting one of the middle or the third proposal was what you were going to lean towards. So I'm just processing this on the fly. But if the vision is shifted where we're really helping the neediest families, what I thought I heard you say is the committee talked about what's the easiest way to give something, give people something that makes sense, that's really easy, that it's a card that's loaded and you can use it and it looks familiar, and then you don't have to enlist the businesses to opt in, and it can be used anywhere, Safeway, Walgreens, Potpourri, you name it, with all the businesses. So I get that. One of the things in my initial thinking when I thought we were leaning towards 90410 is that almost everyone at every level of the socioeconomic ladder, they do show even kids, have phones. So there was something attractive about the ease of distribution, not having a plastic card in one of the virtual options that could be sent via text or email. But I really do see the value in what you're saying. If we do have a distribution point, if we do have a community group that's willing to help us get these physical cards out there, that it doesn't seem unusually onerous to do. I guess my other question that I was thinking through, certainly the free and reduced lunch kids and families are such, and it seems like such a captive audience, because we have school district ambassadors can get these directly in the hands of the 12% of the kids that are in most need. But it also occurred to me, like an organization like Samaritan House that's, knows where their residents are coming from, that might be another great venue that might get people who are definitely from Burlingame that could even like eliminate that PG&E letter step, which is another opt-in, but folks that are coming to Samaritan House to get core services that are right there saying, I need help, I'm desperate. And then, this gift card could be piled on top of there. Was that another thought, or do we think the PG&E thing
Actually, to respond to that specific item, today we were talking through all these options and trying to figure out what recommendation was going to be. And one of the things that we thought about is any cards that are not giving out through the regular fulfillment that we pictured can be donated to the Samaritan House to be specifically given to 94010 people. And so we have, I'm comfortable that what does not get used in this process through the PG&E outreach we can find other ways to reach needy families, but that would be the second step.
Okay.
And if I could just elaborate too, actually you raised you touch on a number of important points, Madam Mayor, and what we have spent a number of hours talking through. So I failed to say that the PCE list yields, I can't remember, I think it's 869 names in Burlingame, 869 households that qualify for reduced utility bills. So we actually, at the suggestion, for a number of different reasons, we reached out to Superintendent McIsaac, and we're still waiting for confirmation, but we believe that can be a second mailing to the BSD families that are on free and reduced school lunch in the same format, so that we wouldn't have privacy issues. We'd let them do the mailing. That's 171 families. So you add them up, that adds up to somewhat more than 1,000, but the likelihood of two things: one, that they're duplicates, and two, that some people just won't get the letter, won't claim it, won't whatever, feels to me like we actually could come in right around the perfect number. So our goal is to do both those communities. And then, as Councilman Ortiz says, to take the residual, we'd have a choice. We could take it back to the general fund, or we could distribute it to Samaritan House. In terms of the choice between just giving the cash to Samaritan House, one, Samaritan House has a very high administrative fee, which is perfectly legitimate, but means we'd help fewer families. I think they're at 12%. But more than that, we think there's an opportunity for this to be a real community creating experience, kind of community bonding experience in Burlingame that we think has some intangible benefits. And that's why, given that we found a partner like St. Paul's to help with distribution, why we recommend going down that road. That said, there's already a lot of administration that goes with this. And so not having the step of having to get merchants to opt in. I mean, one can imagine the rather awkward conversations. You might spend a great deal of time getting merchants to opt in who never get a customer who comes in with a card. And then everyone's kind of embarrassed and irritated. So
or the other one is where somebody goes in with a card to a merchant that's not participating and gets turned down.
Yeah, and that's embarrassing for the user. So that's why ultimately the opt-in programs, as appealing as they were, and given the fact that the data shows nationwide that 70% of a gift card is spent locally, we feel we still achieve both goals of helping needy families and bolstering our own local economy.
Thank you. And the messaging is done well and in multi-languages too. That could really, with the intent, we hope you'll use this in Burlingame. That's a good message too. I can see that. I'm sorry, Councilmember Ortiz, I interrupted you.
So I was going to say there was a comment you made about the electronic delivery and how that would be easier. But when we thought about the demographic we're trying to reach, we figured that a physical card would be better. Even though the delivery of it would be a little more complicated, I think it'll be easier for them to use.
Okay. No, I appreciate really the thoughtfulness that went in there, and I'm certainly not prepared to second guess it. I just thank you for helping us process it on the fly. And I think it sounds like a very reasonable approach that we can still achieve some of the goals. So as well, Councilmember Colson, do you have any other questions before we open up to public comment? We do have reps.
No.
So from St. Paul's, if anybody, we'll ask the city clerk if anybody would like to speak on this item.
No, I don't have any comments.
Okay, and we do thank our the folks, the volunteers, the parishioners, and Ms. Bissell for representing St. Paul's on the call tonight to listen in.
Can I ask one question, which is, Michael, to Councilman Brownrigg and Councilman Ortiz. So when these cards are processed, I suppose we will get the data back as to where the funds are spent. So we will have that data at the end.
Well, interestingly, yes, the answer is yes. I'll keep it at that.
Perfect.
My understanding, Councilmember Brownrigg, was that we were told that we would not be able to get that data because of some privacy issues.
Well, so then to go just a little bit more into the weeds, it may wind up being that although we described the Visa prepaid card, it may wind up being that we use a MasterCard prepaid card because there are some programmatic flexibilities that we became aware of since we wrote the memo about MasterCard, one of which is they could give us a report anonymized, but as to where the money was spent, whereas Visa could not make that commitment. And there are a couple of other factors that make the MasterCard program seem somewhat more optimal. So it would still be exactly as described. It would but it might be MasterCard, in which case then we would be able to report on where the money was spent.
Okay.
And that version of the MasterCard
isn't on the list.
Isn't on the list, but could that be 90410 or?
No, so the MasterCard that's on the matrix is a 94010 opt-in program, and it's as described in the matrix, and it has not all of the downsides that the YIFT card does, but it still has the problem of having people opt in. MasterCard Corporate, when they looked at the matrix, which is a public document, said, well, hold on. If you're willing to think about the Visa program, let us tell you what we could do. And they can do certain things that make it more attractive to the city.
Okay, so basically we would be considering a prepaid card that's not limited to 90410, but that could potentially give us metrics to report, so we can look back at where the community spent the dollars. Yeah. But the programmatic cost would be similar to what
Programmatic costs would be actually somewhat lower, but I mean, just since we're on this level of detail, it also allows us, if we choose to set an expiration date for the card. Visa does not allow this. And so, for example, we could, if we wanted, set a 6-month or 12-month expiration date. I don't think this is much of a problem. I think a needy family is going to spend the card down, but on the off chance that they forget it or lose it or put it in a drawer and forget that they've used it up, at the end of the expiration period, we can actually retrieve the cash through the MasterCard program. The Visa program didn't allow that. So that's another benefit to working with MasterCard.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it sounds like you folks have done a lot of great work. You've become experts in all these various options. Thank you so much for it.
It was nice having a banker as a colleague.
Yeah, I can certainly.
I don't often say that.
So with that, on the staff report, those were the two more complex components, because I think we had pretty general consensus that advisory assistance for SAMCETA was something that we were considering last time. We were moving in we feel comfortable with the small business grant program. It sounds like Councilmember Colson and I support the Kickstart Burlingame MasterCard or Visa proponent, as you've proposed. And then we have the issue of the payment of the business improvement district fees, which is something we discussed last time. Is there any other discussion on that item from the city manager or the subcommittee members?
You all approved that one last time around. So really this resolution was just to formalize all of that. So you approved the last time around the 5,000 for SAMCETA, the 500,000 for small business grant program, the 250 for the Burlingame debit card, and then the approximately 150,000 for next fiscal year for the business improvement districts, and then the parking meter unquantified waiver of parking meter fees. So really it's the resolution, if you're amenable, is to give us a paper trail for all of those different programs.
Okay. So with that, would someone like to make a motion for accepting this resolution? And I think we've also discussed the outreach will be multi-language, which I think is important. I see that Councilmember Brownrigg.
I just want to ask my colleagues permission to make a few small tweaks to the resolution. In part because it became so clear in the public comments that we received that it wasn't that the support for families had been overlooked and the whole program was perceived as a business support program. So there's a couple of small language tweaks I'd like to propose in the whereases, and I can either read them. They're very small, or I can maybe I should read them. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So in the second whereas, we say with a variety of potential business support programs, I would strike business support and say local stimulus. So a variety of potential local stimulus programs, because it makes it clear it's not just about business per se.
You might even say something like local economic stimulus program.
Even better, local economic stimulus. And so I'm going to insert that, and then I'll send this off to the city attorney if we all agree. The fourth whereas says we've approved a small business grant program in the amount of 500,000 and a Kickstart Burlingame debit card. Actually, I'm going to say prepaid card because it's slightly different program for needy Burlingame households in the amount of 250,000 to again underscore that this is first an income support program that we expect to be spent. And then,
I would recommend low income as the word.
Instead of needy?
Needy, I think low income.
Sure, okay, that's good. I'll make that change. And then in the last whereas, I would say to provide $250 stored value cards to 1,000 low-income residents in Burlingame, optimally to be used in Burlingame businesses. So there's small things, but it just makes it just tries to get across the thought of it being a sort of a two-pronged attack at trying to stimulate our local economy.
Yep.
Okay, with that, then I would make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Any other discussion on the motion? I just want to check in with the city attorney. Are those changes appropriate, or did we miss anything that you'd recommend, Madam City Attorney?
No, that's fine. And if Councilmember Brownrigg wants to send the revised language to Megan, then that can be the one that gets put into the, the minutes for the meeting.
Okay. All right, then with that, let's get.
Madam Mayor, this is an odd point of constitutional prerogative. I'd like to defer to Councilwoman Colson to make the motion. She's done a tremendous amount of work in this, and I just like to defer to Councilwoman Colson if she'd like to make the motion.
That's incredibly kind of you, and I would very much like to make the motion. So I'll take and go ahead and make the motion. Thank you very much for allowing me that on the record. And with the items changed per Councilman Brownrigg's recommendation.
All right, and do we have a second?
Let Councilman Ortiz do it. That's fine. That's good.
Unmute.
No, you do it.
He's deferring. So Councilmember Brownrigg, and I think it was very appropriate that you deferred to Councilmember Colson for the motion. She's one of the most hardest working workhorses we have in Burlingame, and
absolutely
like a Tasmanian devil behind the scenes on things like this. So we certainly appreciate that. We'll take our roll call vote.
Councilmember Colson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. Motion and resolution passes unanimously. Thank you again, colleagues, for your great work on that. With that, let me see where I've put my agenda. We are moving now to item 10C. For discussion and direction regarding potential assistance for individuals and families in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, sort of a continuation item from late March where we discussed phase 1. And I think we'll hand this to the city manager who worked really hard on this staff report in the last week or two.
Madam Mayor, so this is a continuation, as you mentioned, of our March 25th discussion. At that point, you voted to provide an initial $30,000 in funding to assist individuals struggling during this public health emergency. And you discussed providing $10,000 to Call Primrose, which is our local Burlingame-based nonprofit, and then $20,000 to Samaritan House, which is the core service agency serving Burlingame. And you'll recall that every June you go through a process where you distribute funding to various groups that apply through our community groups funding program. And both of those agencies are groups that we have funded for many, many years. So individuals will also be able to access funds from SMC Strong. I talked earlier about how that was seeded with an initial $3 million split among businesses, nonprofits, and individuals equally. So at least $1 million will be given out to individuals. I don't know exactly how that money will be distributed, but there is some opportunity there for individuals. There is information on the SMC Strong website for how people can find support. They need to access the resources that I provided in the packet. It is entitled Resources for San Mateo County Residents. There's information about what you need to have, be a San Mateo County resident, demonstrate financial hardship resulting from COVID-19, demonstrate a household income within the past 30 days at or below the income eligibility threshold. And there is a table on this page, this 2-pager that talks about what those thresholds are. And then you have to have financial need that you can demonstrate, such as a letter for past due rent, past due utility or medical bills, et cetera. So a whole lot of criteria there. And so that is one option for individuals. It may or may not work for our individuals who are in need of funding. So, and then that money will likely get spent pretty quickly. We talked earlier about the SBA programs and how that money just disappeared really quickly before any of our businesses could really get the funds. They were all snapped up elsewhere. So we can anticipate that there's a lot of need in this county and that the funding for individuals will also get snapped up. Samaritan House is the agency that is coordinating all this with the 8 core services agencies. So within the county, they've divided it up geographically, and each geographic area has a different agency that is responsible for that area. So again, Samaritan House is our core service agency, and they are the umbrella doing this work. So I looked at, this was the work that Mayor Beach was mentioning. I did a whole lot of research on what other cities were doing. This list may have changed a little bit since I put this report together last week, because all the cities are, continually updating what they're going to provide to their residents and their business community. But Daly City has approved $100,000 using their housing funds to the Daly City Community Service Center, which is their core service agency. This is just for rental assistance. Menlo Park has already contracted with Samaritan House. They've had that in place for about a year for tenant relocation assistance. They pay $100,000 for that, and then the 12% administrative fee that I think Councilmember Brownrigg mentioned. So they decided back in March to repurpose and retitle this program to include tenant rental assistance. So not just relocating you, but also giving you help paying your rental bill. And so folks can get up to $5,000 in financial assistance to help bridge temporary financial gaps. And their whole point in that is preventing homelessness and providing some relief to households that have suffered during this shutdown period. They haven't given any additional money, but they've just changed who can apply for it and what it can be used for. In Redwood City, they actually took 2 bites at the apple. In March, they allocated $150,000 of their transient occupancy tax just from short-term rentals. So anything charged on an Airbnb or VRBO or anything like that, that TOT, they've allocated $150,000 of that to establish a COVID-19 emergency rental assistance fund. It's administered by the Fair Oaks Community Center, which is, it's a City of Redwood City community center, but it's also the core service agency for that part of the county. And then in April, they approved a new general fund allocation of $393,000 for this emergency rental assistance fund. So eligible applicants can get up to $3,000 to help them during this period. So altogether, they have over $500,000. In San Carlos, just last week, they established a tenant assistance program, and they will be working with Samaritan House. They're doing $112,000 from their below market rate housing fund. So $100,000 for tenant assistance, and then $12,000 for program administration. That's that 12%. And the grants are up to $5,000. They can be used only for rent payments. And then San Carlos also is providing $30,500 for helping residents with food insecurity issues. They have a couple of different places that they're sending that money. In San Mateo last week, they are one of the lucky agencies in our county that gets their own community development block grant funding. We do not get that, we're too small. But they approved spending $440,000 in CDBG monies on rental assistance. They will be working with Samaritan House for that. Again, Samaritan House serves San Mateo as well. And then South San Francisco approved $220,000 in rental assistance. And this is going to serve approximately 60 households. The YMCA Community Resource Center is located in South City, and it is their core service agency. So they will be administering the rental assistance at a cost of $22,000. And again, they use their low and moderate income housing fund. And that is, they had a redevelopment agency once upon a time. So they took the housing monies left over from the redevelopment agency, plopped them into their low and moderate income housing fund, and that's what they are using. So in Burlingame here, because we do not want to, with our small staff, try to take everything on ourselves, but we believe in partnering where we can, or at least I do. And you all do, because we've partnered with SAMCETA on the last item. We are recommending that we partner with one or more nonprofit agencies to provide assistance to individuals and families affected by COVID-19. And so I've given you 3 really good organizations that we might consider working with. One is Samaritan House. We did an initial donation of $20,000 last month. We could contract with Samaritan House to provide rental assistance to Burlingame tenants. We can set our own guidelines, so we can decide what the AMI level is that we serve. In San Carlos, households have an income of 120% of AMI or below. They have to occupy a legal unit located in incorporated San Carlos. They have to have a current valid lease agreement, a few other things. And Samaritan House lets us set our own guidelines. They will charge, again, that 12% administrative fee to manage this program on our behalf. Another organization that we work with, I have not spoken to them about this, but they did send out an email asking for assistance with their emergency relief fund. They're trying to raise $150,000 to provide low-income clients and tenants who have been affected by the pandemic with rental assistance, childcare assistance, and/or funding to pay for basic necessities like food or medicine. We could reach out to them if you're so inclined to ask about having a Burlingame-specific allocation. With them, it would be pretty easy because they know exactly how many Burlingame tenants there are and how many homeowners offering or renters offering rooms in their homes to HIP housing clients. And then finally, we've been hearing a lot on our county calls about food insecurity issues. You did an initial donation of $10,000 to Call Primrose, but we could look at an additional donation to Call to help folks who are really struggling to feed themselves and their families. I did reach out to Tyree, who's the executive director. They cannot ensure that funds are only used to assist Burlingame residents. So that is one drawback with Call, but they do know that normally Burlingame residents make up roughly 16% of their base of clients. But they have in the past several months seen a 58% increase in Burlingame households availing themselves of Call Primrose's services. So we know that there is a big need and that a lot more Burlingame residents are going to Call Primrose looking for food. So those are my suggestions if you're interested in supporting one or two or three of the programs. What we do, similar to what we did with the business program, is we had a discussion first and then came back for formal action. And so I would recommend we do the same thing as discussed tonight. You can give direction and then I can come back either in 2 weeks, or we could think about doing a special meeting just for this item next week, just to do an approval to be able to get the dollars out the door. The fiscal impact unknown at this time. It really depends on how much you decide to dedicate to one or more of these programs. Just on our last item, you had, general fund, economic stability reserve, $750,000 charge, and then $115,000 next year. Now, $250,000 of that is really a joint program that's helping a local stimulus program. I think, as Councilmember Brownrigg mentioned, it's helping our businesses, but also helping our residents. So I would take that into account as something that's going on the helping individuals and families side of the ledger as well. But you might want to talk about and think about giving additional funding to one of these agencies, or if there's a different agency that you'd like me to look into, I'm happy to do that. So with that, I will see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Madam City Manager, for the report, but also the hard work you did to pull all this together. Questions on
Sarah had her hand up.
I'm sorry, who did? Oh, yes, Vice Mayor O'Brien.
Yeah, so my question, Lisa, is how come Call Primrose can't ensure that money would go to Burlingame residents?
Terry Bosch just told me that that's not the way they track the information. It's not something that they're able to do. So I did, as I was putting this report together, I did email her and see if there was any way that we could do that, because I know that with Samaritan House, we can say specifically only Burlingame folks, but Call just, I don't know if it's the way they track their clients or what it is that they're just not able to provide that information.
Thanks. Councilmember Brownrigg.
I can answer Vice Mayor O'Brien's.
Okay.
But then I have one of my own. So we went to Call Primrose first, actually, to see about them partnering with us. And without going too deep, it sounds as though, so they're very closely partnered now with Second Harvest Food Bank. And Second Harvest, as a policy matter, does not want to discriminate between needy families based on where they live or other factors. So they really frown on participating in a program that says you get to avail yourself of this and you do not. So that's why I think Call Primrose is averse to limiting it to Burlingame families. My question is, do we have, and I should know the answer to this, but do we have housing impact fees that have started to accrue? And if so, how much?
We don't have any yet. So the housing developments that have gone through have chosen to do the units, which was what we wanted as we put that together. And none of the commercial projects that are making their way through have gotten to the point where they need to pay their fees yet. So we are at zero there. Otherwise, that would be a delightful place to seek funding, but we don't have it yet.
As a matter of accounting, could we advance money against those receipts and then backfill the general fund from them?
I believe we can. Carol is on the line. Carol, do you want to unmute yourself and help with that one? Megan, do you need to unmute her? Oh, there she is.
Am I here?
Yeah.
All right. What was the question? I'm sorry.
My question is, if we chose to do a housing related program, bearing in mind that we don't yet have any funds in the housing impact fund, but we do expect them to arrive, could we fund from the general fund and then backfill from those fees once they arrive?
I am not completely familiar with the ordinance establishing those fees. So, but as long as what we're trying to do with the funds are within the scope of the ordinance, then I imagine if the council decided to use general funds first and get reimbursed, that would be okay.
Thank you.
Madam City Manager, did you have any, I don't know if you had your issue on that. Other questions on the staff report or the discussion? Yes, Councilmember Coulson.
So City Manager Goldman, Lisa, what I'm curious about is how would HIP housing, I personally really like the idea of using HIP housing as well, just to sort of spread the love around a little, and they've been a really good partner in the past. And I think there are going to be a lot of people who just can no longer afford their apartments and are going to be having to move into more of a shared housing situation and some of the things that HIP housing is providing. So how do you envision that working?
So they are raising money right now. I just pulled up their website for an emergency relief fund to help many clients who are facing extreme financial stress pay for rent or childcare, food, medicine, and other necessities. So my guess is we would donate to that. And assuming we could target it, we would say we're donating to that for Burlingame clients.
So another thing I like about that is the element of childcare that's included in that. That I do think there's a lot of need, and people have been off. They've not been working. They don't have childcare. Our recreation center's offline, and we know that a lot of people send a lot of kids through our rec center in the summer. So we may not have capacity. I don't even know. That's actually another alternative too, would be to fund our own, help lower the fees for our own community center for residents that are using our community center this summer for summer camps and things like that to drop off their children. It's not official daycare, but we all know that a lot of people drop their kids off, they go to work, they come back and pick them up in the afternoon. So I might even throw out exploring how we might help our own residents through our own programs.
We don't actually know if we're even going to be able to have programs this summer. We're working on that with the county. So that may just not even be available to us.
So then So then to me, that's another reason to maybe support more, something that can step in and help support daycare, as well as housing insecurity and food insecurity. I just really do like how HIP housing is working. So I'd love to be able to carve something out that we could do there. They do have that match fund. And I know there's a lot of Burlingame residents who are trying to figure out how to help. Maybe we could contribute something to the fund that they would do a match where we would match, all the monies that any Burlingame residents give or something too.
Thank you for the comments. Vice Mayor O'Brien.
I actually like the idea of HIP housing. One, because the funds get dedicated to Burlingame residents. Secondly, they've been a good partner with Burlingame. Thirdly, I like the wide variety of usage, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's maybe someone who is renting a room from an older senior in Burlingame and needs help with their mortgage. So at least if the tenant's getting rent, that helps with that. I think there are many seniors, I can speak to this in regards to throughout the county, that are worried about leaving their home to go to essential businesses, whether it's grocery shopping, picking up their medicine, just because they're a little more, they're the high risk group in regards to the COVID-19. So I do like the aspect of helping with medicine for the older seniors. I'm wondering if we could even incorporate that for ones that may not drive, that is there a transportation component to this that they could utilize to get places also. So I do like the HIP housing actually, and also Samaritan House, but HIP housing especially because there's a wider variety of uses that we can utilize the money.
Thank you for the comments. Before, I'd like to make sure we open up to members of the public before we kind of deliberate on sort of the details, but does anybody have any other questions for staff before we do that?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yes, Councilmember Ortiz.
Okay, so one of the things I'm looking at here, the difference between Samaritan House, that's 12% administrative fee that just keeps bugging. Does HIP housing have an equivalent?
So I don't actually know the answer to that because I did not have an opportunity to talk to them to see what would be involved if we wanted to do a specific Burlingame program.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. I actually had a follow-up question on the Samaritan House, Madam City Manager. I just want to clarify, Samaritan House is such a broad core agency, but it seems that this program, at least the way it's written here, would just be emergency rental assistance that could also address utility payments, but would it have any component of food insecurity at Samaritan House as well, or would this particular program be just exclusively for sort of rental and utility assistance?
So their homelessness prevention program is rent assistance and assistance with utility bills. But they did say that we could kind of create whatever program we want. And I'm fairly certain that I've read that Samaritan House is also doing some things around food insecurity right now. So my guess is we could just ask them, we'd like the following services for our residents. Can you help with that? And that they would be probably amenable to doing that. I wouldn't want to, guarantee that.
Yeah.
Without asking those specific questions. But they do offer quite a number of services because they're the core service agency.
Right. And I mean, at the end of the day, hopefully they could create a program if we chose to donate to Samaritan, but at the end of the day, whether people use it on food or utilities or diapers or.
I mean, it's all kind of fungible, right? If
yeah.
you can't pay your rent, then you can't buy food, or you need money for your basic necessities. They do, again, I'm on their website. They do have a food services component. It looks like they are the largest truck to table food distributor in San Mateo County. So they give out hot meals, bags of groceries. You know, I don't know exactly how that would work, but I'm sure if we said we'd like some money to go to rent and some money to go to food, we could probably figure that out. Or we could, you know, work with Call.
Yeah, okay.
With our local folks.
I see that Councilmember Colson had her hands up, but Michael, Councilmember Brownrigg had his hand up first. Was there something, Councilmember Brownrigg, did you have a?
I just wanted to clarify something. So, you know, I love HIP too. In reading the description of HIP in the staff memo, it wasn't clear to me that the funds they're raising for was just for Burlingame. Like
it's not. It's just a generic fundraising thing that they're doing.
Okay.
That they've put out the word that they need extra money, but we could ask them if they'd be willing to, you know, if we gave them a certain amount of money, could you dedicate this to needy Burlingame clients?
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll wait for the policy discussion. I think HIP does great work. I'm not sure I would limit it necessarily to Burlingame because it's hard for them, but anyway.
Okay, thank you for the question. And Councilmember Colson, did you have a question for staff?
Yeah, so it's more a comment on the Samaritan House. So I've been over there working in the mornings, and there's the way the protocol works, you drive in, you show your proof of need, they give vouchers, and then people basically drive through and pick up groceries. So I think what we could do is we could offer, like, you know, 100 vouchers for Burlingame residents that they could go down to Samaritan House and drive through the line and pick up the food. Something like that might work. We'd have to check it out, but it seems like they've already got a pretty good system going on.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yep, Councilmember Brownrigg.
Just a quick comment. I mean, I bearing in mind that we have done a local program now with the Kickstart, I guess I'm sort of drawn to the more housing side of these potential additional contributions. I do very much agree with the notion of helping support childcare and stuff. So I am sort of drawn to the HIP housing, which is a nexus of housing and childcare and various basic necessities, as opposed to Samaritan House, which I don't know, it just feels to me like this was a little bit different than maybe what we've done with the other part of the program. And by the way, then could be funded by housing impact fees potentially.
And you're getting ahead of our policy debate, but it's a valid comment. Let's make sure we open, if there aren't any more questions, let's open it up to members of the public and see if they have any input on this item, Madam City Clerk. Oh, we can't hear you, Madam City Clerk.
Yep, I got it. We only have one comment, and it's general. It's just says, thank you for making such Herculean efforts to create local economic stimulus programs to support our community so quickly. Meaningful and appreciated. Hashtag in this together. And that comes from Jenny Keller.
Thank you for that public comment. And I know we had a few, as you mentioned earlier, we had some write-ins earlier today, which were received by City Council. Seeing no other public comments raising their hands or writing into the email, we'll close public comment. And we have a couple of issues to deliberate. We have to think about, it sounds like there's momentum to make a meaningful contribution. We have to think about what the right number is. And we have to think about where to distribute it. And I know that some colleagues have offered some thoughts on which of these very worthy organizations might be worth, or how we might distribute it. I have a few comments on that as I think about all this. What I like about Samaritan House is that, first of all, I think they're all incredibly worthy. I do love the flexibility of HIP, that it seems like there's opportunities. It looks like a broader program for all those different necessities, whether it's rental, childcare, basic necessities, food, or medicine. But it does occur to me that the folks that are clients of HIP Housing, who this fund would go to, tend to be single folks as opposed to families. And there are many families that are in need as well. And I feel like although they do serve some families at HIP Housing, it seems like Samaritan House is a little bit broader of an agency that can caters to not just folks that are home sharing, that are also struggling. So I'd like us to maybe consider both. And the other comment I would have is, I'm struck by, and our Councilmember Colson is volunteering down there at Samaritan House, the food insecurity that is happening throughout this county right now. Not only, I know that Terry at Call Primrose mentioned as of March 31st, she sent me a text at one point, they typically have like 27 new client families every month. They had 346 new client families in March alone, and that was just at the beginning of shelter in place. And we hear it on the countywide calls with electeds. We saw it at our union hall here in Burlingame, that folks with union jobs that just are not employed right now are giving out 300 different food boxes last week. So I feel like food insecurity is something, even if we can't 90410 target it, is still something really worthy to think about, whether we can rope it into Samaritan House or Call Primrose. Folks that we should feel good about donating to Call Primrose because it is a Burlingame based nonprofit, but there's many members of, if they don't live here in Burlingame, they might be members of our workforce or worthy families. So I wouldn't rule out Call Primrose too, but I'm open to hearing what colleagues think about those thoughts I put out there. And I do think we should consider a number that's commensurate with what we've invested in the business program, less, the $250,000 of the Kickstart. Is certainly really focused not just on Burlingame businesses, it's focused on families that are in need. So I think somewhere in that number of 500 to 600,000, when you think about the additional 250 that went to Kickstart, would be a reasonable investment from our general fund to help Burlingame families that are most in need. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there as a starting point, and appreciate colleagues' thoughts.
What number are you saying again?
Well, it should be somewhat commensurate with, the business plan as well. And we put forth 755,000 in this fiscal year, plus 115,000 for next fiscal year. But if we take the 755 and we take out the 250,000 for the Kickstart program, which really is for our residents that are most in need, that brings it to about 500,000, where maybe we should consider a number in the 500,000 to 600,000 range, depending on how we look at fiscal year, from that we should consider for some of our most needy residents. So I'm just throwing that idea out there. Okay. Yes, Councilmember Colson.
Or go ahead, Ricardo. You had your hand up first.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was thinking is, again, somebody said it earlier that all these funds are fungible. So when you're giving for food, you're allowing them to spend more money on medicine or rent or utilities. So I'm thinking we just need to get the help to them as efficient as possible. I'm somehow the Call Primrose not having the 94010 restriction doesn't bother me. They do a great job. I think there's a huge need in food insecurity. There's some people who would be willing to go stand there and pick up a bag of food, but would be less inclined to go register at some program where they have to show that they're in need to get rental assistance. And I'm thinking of some of that bothers me the most about all these programs that are out there is that a lot of the people who are undocumented are not eligible for a lot of these programs. So I'm thinking about how we're helping that community. I think Call Primrose is a great way to reach them. But again, I think Samaritan House does a great job, and I hear what you guys are all saying about HIP housing. So I think I would be inclined to give them a pretty good chunk. Before the mayor spoke, I was thinking of a figure of about 300,000. I would consider going higher. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. Councilmember Coulson.
Great. So I think, so first of all, I always want us to always remember that when we put 500,000 into small businesses, what we're doing is creating jobs in this town, and those jobs allow people to buy food and pay rent. So I really don't like when we separate out the fact that, you know, small businesses employ 80% of the people that work in this country, and small businesses have, in restaurants in particular, 80% of those people that work in restaurants are, according to the restaurants in Burlingame that I've talked to, 80% of them are undocumented. So by supporting these businesses and keeping them running and making sure they can open their doors, we are getting people jobs. And when we get people jobs, they can pay for food and they can pay for rent when this is over. So I really just want to make sure that everybody understands these are all kind of interwoven and you know, kind of complementary. So if I look at it that way, I go, okay, 500,000 small business, 250,000 to help our lowest income people, which can spend their money mainly in Burlingame. And then if we added another 250,000 on, we would be at about 500 for small businesses, 500 for individuals. And that would be a pretty good balance. I would also support Councilman Brownrigg's idea of anything that we give specifically toward housing, affordable housing and housing insecurity could be reimbursed from our fees. I think that's a great way to spend our housing fees. And then, you know, it might be hard to divide it up, but say staff could give us an estimate at the end of what it was, and we could come up with something that's pretty close. So I would agree to support all three as well. I do believe that people who use Call Primrose do also shop or often work in Burlingame. They may work at the hospital or they may work for a daycare provider. So I'm not super worried about whether they, you know, I don't think we're ever going to be able to make sure every dollar goes to everyone in Burlingame. Likewise, I think other cities are doing things as well, and they can't guarantee that all their people are going to, it's not, you know, it's kind of, to me, we all are in it together as cities. And so if we all pitch in, whether it's someone from San Mateo coming here or someone from here going down to San Mateo to Samaritan House, it all kind of, it's all for the good. So I would support a number of around 250,000, which I think creates equilibrium between the programs.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
I agree numerically. That feels right to me, but I'm but I'm also interested in whether we should target this for renter assistance. I do think that the Kickstart program is largely, realistically, a food program. And we haven't, it's not going to be easy for them, although money is fungible, to use that for rent because of the nature of the card and so forth. So I noticed that many of the other cities earmark their funding for tenant assistance. And that would also then allow us to bring that money back into the general fund from future impact funds. So I guess the question I'm posing to my colleagues is whether we should limit this to rent and tenant assistance as opposed to food assistance.
So that's an important question. I mean, I see the Vice Mayor has her hand up too. I feel that I know that I've thought about the housing impact fee and brought it up as a potential option, even when we discussed sort of conceptually if we wanted to, in prior meetings. I feel like their need is so great right now under COVID-19 that I lean into using general fund money so that we keep that housing impact fee money for future housing, affordable housing needs. And we wouldn't be the first city to use general fund money to support urgent low income the most vulnerable resident needs. So I wouldn't, to answer your question, I would be more in favor of making sure we're addressing a wide variety of needs, just not rental income assistance, and looking at the various nonprofits that address those different needs. Vice Mayor O'Brien, your thoughts?
Yes. So in regard to how we use the money, I actually would not support just using it for rental assistance. I think there are a lot of older seniors that are in their homes that need assistance right now. There are many seniors that work part-time and now are not working. So I do think whether it's medicine, food that they need, we need to have money for that. There are programs throughout the county, whether it's core agencies or the grants that are used for housing assistance. So I don't mind using some of it for rental assistance, but not all of it. I think 250,000 is a good number due to the fact that we already have 250,000 for the cards that you just approved. I actually feel relatively strongly utilizing it for Burlingame residents. This is money that, you know, our taxpayers have paid. And so the preference would be Burlingame residents. Now, if we didn't have enough Burlingame residents to utilize the money, then we can go into another tier. But I would prefer to see as much of it as possible going to Burlingame residents.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Yes, Councilmember Ortiz.
So, and I agree with most of what everybody was saying, but so we're talking about, I'm hearing a figure of about 250. I was thinking more 300, but let me suggest that Samaritan House will allow the geographic restriction. And we're saying HIP housing, we don't know, but likely they could probably do the restriction. Yes. So what about, colleagues, if we do 100, 100, and then 50 for Call Primrose? That would give you the biggest amount for housing that we can do, then take it from the housing fund. And it would also take care of what Vice Mayor O'Brien, the majority of it would be for Burlingame residents. And even the part that we give to Call Primrose, the majority of that will go to Burlingame residents. We just can't measure it.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
I would support that allocation. I would just point out two things. One, somewhere in the staff report, it said that 16% of the users of Call Primrose are from Burlingame, but I take the wider social point that they could be workers and all sorts of other things. So I would be comfortable with Councilman Ortiz's allocation. I would say that I feel that if the city collectively puts $1 million out the door in grants, which is what we would do, that's a very significant gift from the city of Burlingame. And this is a unique time, but I am sad to say that these hard times are going to be with us for a while. And there is going to be no shortage of opportunities, sadly, to provide money to charity. And we do need to think about our own resources. Yeah. And I would feel more comfortable about going beyond the $1 million number after we've had our budget conversation in May and we really understand what the full impact of a substantial downturn in the travel industry, a substantial downturn in sales tax is going to mean for this city.
Councilmember Coulson.
So I also like Councilman Ortiz's suggestion. I will say that on the Call Primrose piece, I have been when I've been chatting with all the restaurants and getting these pleading phone calls of what we can do to help, I have been telling all of the restaurants in Burlingame, and I bet I've talked to 30 people, 30 different restaurants and businesses. Please, please send your people to Call Primrose. They are available to help. So I think what we may be getting over there are, for example, someone who's closed a restaurant down, they've had to lay off 20 employees. the employees live everywhere from East Palo Alto to whatever, but they're working in Burlingame, and our restaurateurs are calling their staff and saying, please come to Call Primrose and get help. Or if you're, you know, if you're close. So probably it's San Mateo, Foster City, some of those, Millbrae maybe. But I do know for a fact that the restaurateurs are like 100% directing their staff to call for food. They're laid off staff.
Thank you for that. Well, then we have a proposal here on the table of, if I heard it correctly, from considering 100,000 to Samaritan House, 100,000 to HIP Housing, 50,000 to Call Primrose from our general fund or our I'm blanking, city manager, our fund.
Economic Stability Reserve.
Economic Stability Reserve, thank you.
So right now, I think all of this would come from unassigned fund
Unassigned,
balance.
thank you, unassigned fund balance.
But if I could just ask a clarifying question, I like the breakdown of the 100, 150. Samaritan House has that, we'd be paying another 12 grand. Do you want that 12 grand on top or out of the 100? So it's, you know, less.
I'd feel comfortable putting it on top for the 12,000.
112.
112,
Yeah.
like the other cities have kind of done.
Right.
Well, then I would do, if HIP had a fee, I would.
So any fees, we would not take off the amount going to direct service.
Right.
Correct?
I would, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Councilmember Coulson.
I would also suggest that, you know, in the event that the housing linkage fees show up, you know, we could reserve the option to reimburse the general fund for the $200,000 that was going to housing specifically. We don't have to do it, but I think we're going to be faced with some pretty severe cuts, and we all know $200,000 funds one police officer, and I don't want to lay off police officers. I don't want to be cutting our library hours. All those things are really, really important too. And so if we put those housing leakage fees together, one of the ideas was to take a portion of them up to, you know, 25, 50% that could be used for ongoing. So, you know, given the stresses that are going to occur and the fact that we are going to have to make some really difficult decisions, to me, I would prioritize it like that.
So we can definitely come back if and when those monies materialize and call the question on that. But right now, what I'm hearing, I think consensus is 250,000. Fees are on top of that if we have to pay any. 100 to Samaritan, 100 to HIP, 50 to Call Primrose. And to the extent that we can, with Samaritan House, we can definitely geo restrict. For HIP, I would imagine we can, but I'll have to pay. And then for Call, we know that a lot of Burlingame folks are visiting, and so it will serve a lot of our residents. Does that seem right?
Yep.
Can I just ask a quick question of colleagues? Given the success of Meals for Mills, should we take some small allocation of Call Primrose and put that into that program that helps healthcare workers?
You know, my feeling on that is that has a lot of momentum right now, and the healthcare workers are being well fed 3 times a day, and the money keeps growing. I think I think our vision here to help sort of need-based folks is a good one with these core agencies.
The hungry people are the ones you're going to help through Call Primrose.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I think we leave it. That's my instinct. I'm curious what.
I agree with that.
I would agree also.
So, but thank you for asking the question.
So
Yeah,
what I can do is get more information about how it would work with HIP housing, and then bring it all back similar to what I did tonight with a resolution for you to adopt and to go forward. For Samaritan House, we can set our AMI. Does does 120 sound right? What San Carlos did, model it after the San Carlos program?
Yeah. I like
Yes.
that.
That's a good question. Do we want to have any further debate on that? Should it be a lower number, or does that feel like a good number to colleagues?
No, I think the 120 is fair because it covers a wider variety of demographics.
Agreed.
Okay, to degree, do I see heads nodding or any?
But
other?
can we say that if HIP housing, if HIP housing is able to limit it to 94010, that you can go ahead with it? So you don't have to come back to us?
Well, the whole thing, I'd like to come back with a resolution just so that, so we have the paper trail, just like I did with the business program.
Okay.
But, I'll put all three, assuming we can do it, I'll put all three in. I just want you to formally vote on it.
Okay.
It's easier for us
perfect.
to track somewhere down the line what
So
all
you're
the
thinking,
stuff is.
so it's like an emergency meeting that we'll have next week?
Well,
or
we
something?
can do that, or we can wait until our next council meeting 2 weeks out. So it's, really up to you. It's easier to schedule these special meetings now that we all are trapped. But on the other hand, we're all busy with lots of things. So
I think, Madam City Manager, if you talk to the core agencies and it seems like they have a cash flow issue that they need, the action sooner rather than later, we'd be open to it. If it seems like it's something that can wait for the next regular agenda, that's fine too. So we'll defer to your judgment.
Okay.
Does that sound agreeable to?
Yeah.
the
But I
colleagues?
think I have good direction on where you all want to go.
Yeah, well, thank you so much
Thank
for the great discussion, and to our city manager for really researching all those options. So we appreciate it. Okay, with that, wow, big, heavy meetings we've had here, but they've been pretty efficient discussions. Number 11, we don't need any further vote on that, right, Madam City Manager? Because this is just direction. So we're on council activities and reports. Everybody's been busy, but any other further highlights? Yes, Councilmember Brownrigg.
Just briefly, sorry for not writing a report, but I think I'm not sure if I mentioned last time that I've been appointed to the long range planning effort at the county to think about post-COVID. So there were seven subgroups considering such questions as what happens if there's a second disaster during the COVID crisis? How do we do economic recovery? How do we make sure there's equity in the way we proceed? What are the triggers for lifting shelter in place? How do we handle education? How do we handle the second wave of infections, which we all expect? And how do we make sure we can provide resources for people who are sheltered and immobile? So I'm a part of that effort, and I hope that the group of consultants who seem to be have a very good track record and of accomplishment nationwide actually are helping the county steer through that thought process. So just wanted to share that with colleagues.
Thanks for sharing that. We're really glad you have you're our rep and that you've got a voice on that committee. That's a really important one. Delighted to hear you're on that. Any other further highlights? Seeing none. We do have a future agenda item. Does anybody have one they would like to consider for consideration? Yes, Councilmember Coulson.
I think it's just the one that we discussed earlier about the possibility of looking at the charter city. And Lisa wasn't in that meeting, so Kathleen will explain it all to you, what we discussed, but.
I think if we could, maybe we'll start with an internal review of that first, and then we can decide if it's appropriate to agendize it. Yeah.
That'd be great, Kathleen. I just wanted to make sure that one of us floated it, so you didn't have to take the hit on that.
Yeah, well, we'll do a little background research, and I'll confer with the city manager, and then we'll.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I know it's late. I do have one future agenda item I wanted to float to see if there's interest, because it is timely and related to COVID-19. We had a suggestion come up through our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which also contains representatives from our Traffic Safety Parking Commission, to consider what some cities are doing, what MTC has put out presentations on encouraging cities to consider, and cities across the country are considering having certain streets limited to through traffic, still allowing residents to drive down a street or get essential deliveries or essential visits, but try to, while people are social distancing and moving on sidewalks and cycling, to have certain streets, maybe zones where people can have additional social distance and comfort, that there'll be limited auto traffic. And I just had some very short informal conversations with staff to see if this is something that could even be considered as far as bandwidth, and ways that maybe it could be a ground up rather than a top down suggestion. But I'd like to just, before even considering, we certainly can't debate it, but is there anybody else that might be interested in possibly exploring this, since it is relatively timely, depending on how long shelter in place might continue, as a future agenda item?
What,
Yes, Councilmember Brownrigg.
I definitely would support talking about that if staff thinks that we can have a meaningful conversation quickly enough to actually do something within the next few weeks. Because, I mean, shelter in place will end, and if the future, I mean, I guess, anyway, I support the idea. I do want to make sure that there's something practical that can come out of it. But I think this period of enforced social experimentation is one, in many ways, for education and other, sort of dyed-in-the-wool bureaucracies. This is a chance to rethink things. So I think there's a bunch of interesting questions to do with the way we manage streets. So yes, I would support it if staff thinks that they have the bandwidth.
Okay, all right. Well,
Could I?
yeah.
Could I just maybe, I don't want to comment on it, but just if you are going to think about that, the notion has come up about shutting down Burlingame Avenue a night or two a week in the summer to allow the restaurants, when they are allowed to be open, to spill out into the street, in order that they could social distance and still serve the same amount of residents. So to me, that would be far more valuable than closing down a street that already no one is driving on other than the people who live there, because you're not supposed to be driving unless you're going for an emergency thing.
Good point. That can be part of the agenda too.
Okay. So we can, it sounds like there's some interest in exploring. Appreciate the comments. And if colleagues have additional thoughts for staff to consider as we prepare a discussion item for this, feel free to send them to staff in the next couple days, in the next week or so. All right, well, thank you for that. Any other future agenda items? All right, seeing none. Acknowledgements, we do have one that's very important, from a beloved constituent who lived to be 97 years old. A beloved Martha May, who was a mainstay of our historical society. I'm going to, when Jennifer Pfaff, the president of our historical society, alerted the council to Martha's passing, I asked if Jennifer, if there was a member of our council that Ms. May felt particularly close to, or that would be most appropriate to offer a tribute tonight. And Jennifer thought that that she felt close to many council members, but that certainly with Councilmember Colson's, deep commitment to historical preservation here in the city of Burlingame, but also on the national level with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, that she always felt great respect for Councilmember Colson on that, and kind of a affinity. And so I'd like to turn it over for Councilmember Colson to just say a few words about Ms. Martha May.
Thank you. And thanks to Jennifer Pfaff, who really helped craft some of this. Also to Russ Cohen, who put together a really lovely commemorative pictorial and commentary from people, which was really beautiful. And then finally to Kathy and Joe Baylock, who shared a lot of stories with me over the weekend about Martha, and really attribute the whole foundation for the Burlingame Historic Society as coming from Martha's work, where she was basically hoarding Burlingame paraphernalia underneath her dining room table and in her closets and under her bed, apparently, until they convinced the city council to allow them to have the Gunst House. But just briefly, so Martha May was an extraordinary yet exceedingly humble person. She spent nearly half of her life devoted to chronicling the history of Burlingame, always making time for a quote chin wag with newcomers and old timers alike. As a child of a homesteader in the Arizona desert, she never lost her interest in learning about the life of pioneers and those who build up communities from scratch. She originally, people may not know this, was a nurse and later a photographer for Sunset Magazine in Palo Alto. And by the time she settled in Burlingame in the early 70s, she had become a realtor. She immersed herself in the history of those who built the town, regular folks, as she called them, wanting to make sure that the history of the early townspeople who built our community would not be forgotten. She was concerned that a lot of the early history was being thrown out. And so she and a small group of like-minded community members started to collect things under their tables, etc., having conversations with relatives and friends of the early pioneers, jotting down notes and collecting old photographs. Before long, the collection was being stored in every single nook and cranny throughout all of their homes, and hers in particular. And I believe, I don't think it says it here, but I believe that they literally collected over almost 150,000 items about Burlingame history. In 1975, the four founders and a group of loyal followers established the nonprofit Burlingame Historical Society. 15 years later, in the mid-1980s, with the council's blessing, the group moved their collection to the Gunst Carriage House in Washington Park, where it remains today. Honored as Burlingame's first recipient of the Walk of Fame award during our centennial in 2008, she continued her work at home through 2020, collecting items for the archives until shortly before she passed away Easter weekend. I would call her the equivalent of the Jane Jacobs, standing out for the rights of historic preservationists. She was of that vintage. She was that type of a woman. And I think all of us, 30,000 people who live in Burlingame today and every single soul that will live here in the future owe Martha May an enormous amount of gratitude for keeping a rich and vivid history that we all cherish and love. So thank you to her, thank you to her family, and thank you to our former council members who had the foresight to help set this historic society up. And with that, I think we'll close the meeting in her honor. Emily, is that your call or mine? I guess you're on mute, so it's mine.
Sorry, did I
unmute?
My lip sync was just making sure we had a moment of silence, but I think we accomplished that through my moment of silence gesture without being on mute, while being on mute. So thank you so much for the beautiful tribute, Donna. You did a great job, and we appreciate her great contributions to the city of Burlingame, and I'm glad we could have a moment of silence tonight. So with that, we thank members of the public who stuck with us till the end. Great conversation, colleagues. We accomplished a lot. Remember, to the public, let's keep our faces covered. It's a new important part of the order that is the health order right now. We have to cover our faces when we're in public places. Optional for exercise, but stay healthy, stay safe. Stay optimistic. And with that, we thank you for your participation. We'll adjourn at 10:45. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye-bye. Take care.